This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I still can't sleep when it snows. It's been 3 years, but every time I hear that soft hush outside my window, I'm right back there in that house, in that moment. I've tried therapy. I've tried moving to a warmer climate. Nothing helps. I figured maybe writing it down might make a difference, so here goes. It was December 23rd, 2019. My roommate Laura had left 2 days earlier to spend Christmas with her family in Florida. I had planned to drive to my parents' place on Christmas Eve, but in the meantime, I was house-sitting for Laura. Simple stuff. Water her plants, feed her cat Otis, bring in the mail. Laura lived in this beautiful old 2-story house on the edge of Westwood, a tiny town where nothing ever happens. The house was her grandmother's before she passed, and Laura got it in the will. Lucky her. The weather forecast had mentioned a chance of snow, but nobody expected what we got. By noon, it was coming down so thick I could barely see the oak tree in the front yard. By 3 p.m., the roads were completely covered. I called my parents to let them know I might be delayed depending on how the plows handled things. "Don't risk it if it looks bad," my mom said. "We'd rather have you safe." I wasn't too bothered. Laura's house was cozy, and I had brought my laptop, some books, and enough food. Plus, there's something peaceful about being alone during a snowstorm. I made hot chocolate, curled up on the couch with Otis purring beside me, and watched the snow pile up outside the bay window. The wind picked up throughout the afternoon, howling around the corners of the house. I actually enjoyed it. There's something comforting about being inside while nature rages outside. At least, that's what I thought then. Around 5 p.m., I got a text from Laura checking in. I sent her a picture of Otis sleeping with his paws stretched out and assured her everything was fine. The snow was still falling heavily, and the weather app on my phone showed the storm intensifying overnight. Great. I heated up some leftover pasta for dinner and settled in to watch a movie. Laura's house didn't have great Wi-Fi, another charming feature of being on the outskirts of a small town, so I browsed through her DVD collection. I picked some cheesy rom-com and was about halfway through when the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then darkness. Power outage. It was about 9 p.m. The sudden silence was jarring. No hum of the refrigerator, no furnace, nothing but the wind outside. My phone showed I still had service, barely, with one wavering bar. I texted Laura to let her know about the power, not expecting a response since she was at a family dinner. I wasn't too worried at first. I found some candles in the kitchen drawer and lit a few, placing them carefully away from anything flammable. My phone flashlight helped me navigate to locate more. I found a solid flashlight in the hall closet, one of those heavy-duty ones that could double as a weapon if needed. Not that I was thinking that way yet. The temperature in the house was already dropping. I layered up with a sweater I found in Laura's closet, sorry Laura, and wrapped myself in the thick throw blanket from the couch. Otis, smart cat that he is, curled up against me for warmth. "Looks like it's just us tonight, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ears. Without electricity, there wasn't much to do. I couldn't even read comfortably with just candlelight, so I sat there, listening to the storm. The wind seemed to be getting stronger, rattling the windows in their frames. The house creaked and groaned as old houses do. I've always had an overactive imagination, and sitting alone in a dark house during a storm wasn't helping. Every noise made me a little more tense. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I heard it, a distinct thud from upstairs. I froze. Otis's head shot up, his ears perked forward. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe something had fallen over because of the house settling in the cold. Or maybe Otis had left some toy precariously balanced that had finally decided to drop. But Otis was right here with me. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "Old houses make noise." But then there was another sound, like something being dragged across the floor upstairs. My heart started hammering in my chest. Otis jumped off my lap and stared up at the ceiling, his tail swishing nervously. I grabbed the flashlight tight, its weight reassuring in my hand. I debated what to do. If someone was upstairs, I should get out of the house immediately. But the storm outside was brutal, and my car was already half buried in snow. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. Then I heard another noise, and Otis bolted toward the stairs as if chasing something. "Otis!" I hissed, but he was already halfway up the stairs. I couldn't leave him. Taking a deep breath, I followed, flashlight held out in front of me like a talisman. The beam bounced off the walls as I climbed, creating distorted shadows that seemed to move on their own. The staircase creaked under my weight. Each step felt like it took an eternity. At the top of the stairs, I paused, listening. The house was silent, except for the wind outside. The upstairs hallway stretched before me, with 3 doors: bathroom, guest room, and Laura's bedroom at the end. All the doors were closed. Otis was sitting outside Laura's room, staring at the door and making a low growling sound I'd never heard from him before. "Otis," I whispered, "come here." He ignored me. I moved slowly down the hallway, checking the bathroom first. Empty. The guest room too, nothing out of place. That left Laura's bedroom, where Otis remained fixated on the door. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. I hesitated, then turned it slowly, pushing the door open with the flashlight extended. What I saw made my blood run cold. Laura's normally immaculate room was in complete disarray. Papers scattered across the floor, books knocked from the shelves. The bedding was half pulled from the bed. But what made my heart nearly stop was the window, wide open, with snow blowing in and accumulating on the hardwood floor. The curtains whipped violently in the wind, but worst of all were the footprints. Wet, snowy footprints leading from the window across the room. I stood frozen in place, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Someone had been in here. Someone had climbed in through the window. Were they still in the house? I swept the flashlight around frantically, checking behind the door, under the bed, inside the closet. No one. But the footprints told the story. They crossed the room to the door, then disappeared into the hallway carpet. With shaking hands, I rushed to the window and looked out. There were more footprints on the roof of the porch below, leading away toward where a large tree branch extended near the house. Someone had climbed that tree, walked across the branch to the roof, and then to the window, in the middle of a snowstorm. I slammed the window shut and locked it, my breathing coming in short gasps. I needed to get out of there. I needed to call 911. I turned to leave and nearly tripped over Otis, who was now arching his back and hissing at something downstairs. Then I heard it, a heavy thud from the first floor. My fight or flight response kicked in hard. I grabbed Otis, tucked him under my arm despite his protests, and moved to the top of the stairs. From there, I could see the front door, or more specifically, I could see that it was wide open, snow swirling in through the doorway. Footprints zigzagged across the entry hall floor and out into the yard, leading toward the dark line of trees at the edge of the property. Someone had just left the house. I rushed down the stairs, nearly falling in my panic. I slammed the front door shut, locked it, then dragged a heavy chair from the dining room and wedged it under the doorknob. I did the same with the back door, then checked all the windows on the first floor, making sure they were locked. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to call 911, but my phone showed no service now. The storm must have knocked out a cell tower. I was completely cut off. I gathered all the candles into the living room, creating a small circle of light. I positioned myself in the corner where I could see both the stairs and the front door. The flashlight was gripped tightly in my hand, and I'd also grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Otis huddled against me, unusually still and quiet. Every creak of the house, every howl of the wind made me jump. I kept imagining footsteps outside, shapes moving past the windows. The hours crawled by. I didn't dare sleep, but exhaustion was taking its toll. My eyes burned from staring into the darkness, trying to distinguish real movements from imagined ones. I must have dozed off eventually because I jerked awake suddenly, the flashlight rolling from my grip. Gray dawn light was filtering through the windows. The storm had passed during the night, leaving an eerie stillness. Otis was no longer beside me. "Otis," I called, my voice hoarse. No response. I stood up, my body stiff and aching from sitting in one position all night. The house was freezing now, my breath visible in the air. I picked up the flashlight and knife again, though they felt less necessary in the daylight. Looking toward the front door, I expected to see the snowdrifts that had blown in last night. But the floor was dry. Had I cleaned it up before barricading the door? I couldn't remember. My mind felt foggy. I moved cautiously to the window and looked out. The world was transformed into a white landscape, beautiful in the morning light. But something was wrong with the footprints in the yard. They weren't leading out anymore. They were coming back. I stared, trying to make sense of it. The footprints I'd seen last night had been leaving the house, heading toward the woods. But now there was a clear trail coming from the tree line, leading straight back to the house, to the front door. I backed away from the window, panic rising in my throat. If the intruder had returned, where were they now? I hadn't heard anyone come in, but I'd been asleep. The chair was still wedged under the doorknob. Had they found another way in? Then I saw it. Wet footprints on the stairs. Not going up, but coming down, and they were fresh. Someone had come down from upstairs while I was sleeping. I nearly screamed. My eyes darted around the living room, searching for any sign of movement, any place someone could be hiding. Nothing. "Otis?" I called again, louder this time. "Kitty, where are you?" A soft thump answered me from the kitchen. I held the knife out in front of me and moved slowly toward the sound. The kitchen was empty, but Otis was sitting by his food bowl, looking up at me expectantly, as if nothing was wrong. "Jesus, Otis," I whispered, my heart still racing. I glanced back at the wet footprints on the stairs. They ended at the bottom step. Whoever had made them wasn't in the house anymore. Had they left through another exit? All the doors and windows were still locked from the inside. With daylight giving me courage, I decided to check upstairs again. I climbed the stairs slowly, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, though I didn't need it now. At the top, I paused. The door to Laura's room was open. I was sure I'd closed it last night. I approached cautiously, peering inside. The room was still a mess, but something was different. The window was open again, snow piled on the floor beneath it. But there was something else, something on Laura's bed that hadn't been there before. A wet, darkened shape on the comforter. I stepped closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was the imprint of a body, as if someone soaking wet had lain there recently. The moisture hadn't even begun to dry. That was when I heard a noise from the closet, a soft, sliding sound. The closet door was partially open, though I distinctly remembered checking it last night. I didn't wait to see what was inside. I ran down the stairs, grabbing my phone and car keys, not even stopping for my coat. I yanked the chair away from the front door, fumbled with the lock, and burst outside into the blinding white morning. My car was still half buried in snow, but adrenaline gave me strength. I scraped just enough snow off the windshield to see, started the engine, and reversed down the driveway, tires spinning and sliding. I didn't stop until I reached the police station in town. The officers were skeptical, especially when they escorted me back to the house and found nothing. No footprints outside. They'd been covered by a fresh dusting of snow that had started falling. No wet spots on the stairs or bed. No sign that Laura's room had been disturbed at all. Even the window was closed and locked from the inside. The storm can play tricks on your mind, one officer told me kindly. Being alone in a power outage, it's easy to imagine things. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. They didn't find any fingerprints besides mine and Laura's. No signs of forced entry. They suggested I might have sleepwalked, opened the window myself, confused reality with a nightmare. I stayed at a hotel until Laura returned. I never told her the full story, just said the power went out and I got spooked staying alone. She thought it was funny. She still lives in that house. Sometimes I wonder if I really did imagine it all. But then I remember one detail I never told the police. When I was fleeing the house, I glanced back once. There, in Laura's bedroom window, I saw a face watching me go. Not Laura's face, not anyone's face I recognized. Just a pale oval with dark eyes, observing silently as I escaped. I still don't know who it was or what they wanted. I don't know how they got in or out of that house without leaving any trace the police could find. All I know is that I've never felt safe in a snowstorm since, and I always make sure my windows are locked at night. I still don't sleep well when it snows. It's been almost 8 months since that night, but every time I hear the wind pick up or see those first few flakes falling, my whole body tenses up. I've moved back to an apartment complex now, 4th floor, secure building, lots of neighbors. I don't care about the noise anymore. I'd take barking dogs and loud music over silence any day. Last February, I was so proud of myself. At 24, I'd finally saved enough to rent my own little house after years of cramped apartment living with paper-thin walls and neighbors who seemed to vacuum at 3 a.m. It wasn't anything special, just a small 2-bedroom on the edge of town where the suburbs start to thin out. The rent was surprisingly affordable, which should have been my first clue something wasn't quite right. The house had issues. The windows were old and drafty. The heating system was temperamental at best. The floorboards creaked if you so much as looked at them. But it was mine. My own driveway, my own tiny backyard that backed up to a stretch of woods, and most importantly, blessed quiet. That weekend in February started like any other winter weekend. The forecast had been warning about a major snowstorm for days, but living in the Midwest, you get used to these warnings. Half the time they amount to nothing. This time was different. By Friday morning, the snow was coming down so hard you could barely see across the street. My boss texted that the office was closed and that we'd probably be shut down Monday too based on what was coming. I remember feeling this weird mix of excitement and relief, a guilt-free 3-day weekend to just relax at home. I spent Friday morning making sure I was prepared, Charged all my devices, filled some containers with water just in case, gathered all my candles and matches in one place. I even made a trip to the grocery store before the roads got too bad. By noon, the snow was about 8 inches deep and still falling heavily. The thing about heavy snow is how it changes the world around you. Everything gets muffled. The neighborhood that was usually filled with the sounds of kids playing, cars driving by, and dogs barking just disappeared. All I could hear was the occasional groan of tree branches heavy with snow and the distant scraping sound when the wind picked up. I spent the afternoon making soup, watching Netflix, and texting friends about their storm experiences. Around 4:30, I noticed the internet getting spotty. By 5:15, it was gone completely. No big deal. I had downloaded some shows and had a stack of books I'd been meaning to read. At 6:08 p.m., I remember checking my phone. The power went out. 1 second I was scrolling through Instagram, and the next, my house was plunged into darkness. I wasn't too concerned at first. Power outages during storms were common enough. I figured the electrical company would have it back on within a few hours. I lit some candles, wrapped myself in my thickest blanket, and settled on the couch with a book and my phone flashlight. The temperature in the house was already starting to drop without the heating, but I was still comfortable enough. I had no cell service. The storm had knocked out the local tower, but I wasn't worried. It was kind of nice, actually. Peaceful. That peace lasted exactly 47 minutes. I was deep into my book when I heard it, a crunching sound outside, the distinct sound of footsteps in snow. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor checking on houses or looking for their dog or something. But something about the rhythm of those steps made my skin prickle. They were slow, deliberate, not the hurried steps of someone caught out in a blizzard trying to get home. I went to my front window and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. The streetlights were out due to the power outage, but there was this weird glow that snow creates, reflecting whatever moonlight filtered through the clouds. That's when I saw him, a figure walking past my front yard, staying just at the edge of my property line. The thing that struck me immediately was how he was dressed, or rather, how he wasn't dressed. No heavy coat, no hat, no gloves that I could see. Just what looked like regular clothes, maybe jeans and a hoodie or light jacket, in a blizzard, in single-digit temperatures. I let the curtain fall back and told myself it was probably some teenager doing something stupid on a dare. But if I'm honest, I knew right then something was wrong, really wrong. People don't just wander around during blizzards underdressed, especially not in this neighborhood where the houses were spread out and there wasn't really anywhere to walk to. I blew out all but one candle to make it harder to see inside my house and moved to the kitchen at the back of the house. I was trying to decide if I should call someone when I remembered I had no service. No way to contact anyone. That's when I heard the crunching again. But this time, it wasn't passing by my house. It was coming around the side, toward the back. My kitchen had a small window above the sink and another by the back door. I went to the sink window first and peered out. Nothing. The footsteps stopped. I stood completely still, barely breathing, straining to hear over the howling wind. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. Then I heard it, a soft knock at my back door. Not an urgent, "Help me, I'm freezing" knock. Just a gentle tap, tap, tap. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then the knocking came again, a little louder. Tap, tap, tap. The back door had a small window in the top half, covered by a thin curtain. I couldn't see out without moving the curtain, and I sure as hell wasn't going to do that. But I could see a shadow through the fabric, Someone was definitely standing there. Then I heard the sound that still haunts my nightmares, the soft jiggle of fingers testing my doorknob. My heart nearly stopped. I'd locked the deadbolt earlier, hadn't I? I always did. But had I checked it after bringing in groceries? I couldn't remember. The jiggling stopped. 5 seconds of silence followed, then the longest creak I've ever heard in my life. The door was opening. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my phone and ran as quietly as I could to my bedroom, closing and locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone, and it skittered under the bed. I got down on my knees to reach for it when I heard a voice from the kitchen. "Hello? Is anyone home?" The voice was male, calm, almost friendly, like he was a neighbor stopping by to borrow sugar, not a stranger breaking into my house during a blizzard. "I saw the candlelight. I know you're here. I just want to talk." I froze. My fingers had just touched my phone under the bed, but I didn't dare pull it out now, afraid the light might show under the door. I stayed there, crouched on the floor, listening as footsteps moved from the kitchen into the living room. "It's cold out there," the voice continued, still eerily conversational. "Much nicer in here. Cozy." I heard him moving around the living room, the rustle of him picking things up, setting them down, the creak of the couch as he sat down. "Nice place you have. You live here alone." My bedroom shared a wall with the living room. He was close, too close. And there was something about his tone that had changed, like he was enjoying this, playing with me. I knew I couldn't stay in the bedroom. If he tried the door and found it locked, he'd know exactly where I was. I looked up at the ceiling, at the small square panel that led to the attic. I'd only been up there once when I first moved in. It was just an unfinished storage space with some old insulation and a few forgotten boxes from previous tenants. As quietly as possible, I pulled the desk chair to the center of the room. I climbed up, pushed the attic panel aside, and pulled myself up. The fold-down ladder was still extended from the last time I'd been up there, which was a stroke of luck I desperately needed. I carefully pulled the ladder up behind me and slid the panel back into place just as I heard footsteps approaching my bedroom. "Are you in there? Come on out. I'm not going to hurt you." His voice had changed again, harder, impatient. I lay flat on the rough attic boards, not daring to move. There was a layer of old pink insulation between the attic floor and the ceiling of my bedroom, but it wasn't thick. I could hear everything. He tried the doorknob, found it locked. "Open the door." All pretense of friendliness was gone now. "Open the fucking door!" I heard a thud, his shoulder against the door, then another. On the third hit, there was a splintering crack as the frame gave way. "Where are you, bitch? I know you're in here somewhere." I could hear him tearing apart my bedroom, drawers yanked open, closet door flung wide, even the mattress flipped over. Something shattered, probably my bedside lamp. "Where are you?" He was screaming now, enraged. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle any sound. I was shaking so hard I was afraid the attic floor might creak. The dust in the air made me want to cough, but I fought it with everything I had. For the next hours, I don't know how many, I lay there listening as he systematically searched the entire house. The bathroom, the spare bedroom, back to the kitchen, opening cabinets, moving furniture, occasionally calling out, sometimes cajoling, sometimes threatening. His mood seemed to swing wildly between controlled and furious. At one point I heard him directly beneath me, standing in the hallway. "Attic," he muttered. "Is there an attic?" My heart stopped. I saw the beam of a flashlight, My flashlight that I'd left on the coffee table, scanning the ceiling. I didn't breathe, didn't move a muscle. The light passed over the attic panel once, twice. He was looking for a pull cord or handle, but there wasn't one. You needed a chair to reach it. After what felt like forever, he moved on. I heard him go back to the kitchen, rummaging through drawers. The distinctive sound of my knife block being emptied, metal against metal as he tested each blade. Sometime around 3 a.m. the house grew quiet. Had he left? I didn't dare move to check. I'd long since lost feeling in my arms and legs from lying so still, but fear kept me paralyzed. What if he was just waiting silently, knowing I'd eventually have to come down? I must have fallen into an exhausted, fear-drenched sleep, because the next thing I knew, dim gray light was filtering through the tiny vent at the far end of the attic. Morning. I'd made it through the night. I listened for what felt like hours. Nothing. No movement. No voice. Just the howling of the wind outside. Finally, around 8 a.m. by my phone's clock, which was nearly dead, I worked up the courage to move the panel and peer down into the hallway. Empty. I lowered the ladder with trembling hands and descended, every muscle screaming in pain. The house was destroyed, everything upended, slashed, broken, but empty. The back door stood wide open. Snow drifted across the kitchen floor. Outside, a single set of footprints led from my back door straight into the woods behind my house. I ran to my neighbor's house, half-dressed, hysterical. They called the police on their landline since cell service was still down. The police came, took my statement, searched the woods. They found nothing. No one. The footprints disappeared about 50 yards into the trees, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. They told me it was probably someone looking for a warm place to ride out the storm, maybe a drug addict or homeless person. They suggested I'd been lucky they hadn't found me. But I know better. This wasn't a desperate person seeking shelter. The way he spoke, how he searched, how he was dressed. He came for me specifically. He knew I was alone. He'd planned it during the perfect storm, when I'd be completely isolated with no way to call for help. The power came back on 2 days later. By then, I was staying with friends. I never spent another night in that house. Broke my lease, lost my security deposit. Don't care. I still don't know who he was or why he targeted me. I've replayed every interaction I've had in the past year, trying to think if I'd angered someone or if someone had shown unusual interest in me. Nothing stands out. The police never found him. They say there hasn't been any similar break-ins reported. They suggested maybe I exaggerated some details due to fear, but I know what I heard, what I saw, what I felt. I still wake up sometimes hearing that voice. I just want to talk, and I still wonder, what if the storm had lasted another day? What if he'd looked up and seen the attic panel wasn't quite aligned? What if he comes back and finds me? Because the worst part is, I'll never know if he was a random opportunist or if he had chosen me long before that night. And I'll never know if he's still out there, waiting for the next perfect storm. Ew. I never wanted to go to that stupid cabin anyway. I only agreed because Lily had been begging me for weeks, going on and on about how her family's mountain retreat was just what we needed after our hellish semester finals. A weekend away from the city, from our cramped apartment with the constantly leaking faucet and the neighbors who fought at 3 a.m. It sounded good in theory. Trust me, Kayla, she kept saying. No internet, no distractions, just peace and quiet and nature. What she failed to mention was just how remote the damn place was. I mean, I knew it was in the mountains, but I didn't realize we'd be driving 3 hours from civilization. The last hour on roads that barely qualified as roads. The trip started fine. We left early Saturday morning, January 12th, with a car full of snacks, blankets, and enough alcohol to make the isolation bearable. The forecast had mentioned a chance of snow, but nothing serious. Lily was confident. "The cabin's built for winter weather," she assured me. "My dad keeps it stocked with firewood and emergency supplies." About 2 hours in, the weather changed. The light flurries became heavier, the wind picked up, and the temperature dropped so quickly that the car's heating system struggled to keep up. I pulled my jacket tighter around me while Lily squinted through the windshield, the wipers working overtime against the increasingly heavy snowfall. "Maybe we should turn back," I suggested, watching the road disappear under a fresh coat of white. "This is getting bad." "It's only another hour," Lily insisted. "The cabin will be worth it, I promise." I should have pushed harder. I should have insisted. That's the thought that keeps me up at night. The GPS signal got spotty as we climbed higher into the mountains. The snow was coming down in thick sheets now, the kind that swallow sound and light. The road narrowed, winding through dense forest, the trees heavy with snow and leaning toward us like they were trying to peek inside our car. Then we saw it, a wooden sign half covered in snow. Hollow Creek, Scenic Detour. The paint was faded, but it had an official-looking Forest Service logo. "That's weird," Lily said, slowing the car. "I don't remember this from before." "Is it on the GPS?" I asked. She checked her phone. "No signal, but look, it says it's scenic. And if it leads to Hollow Creek, that's only like 15 minutes from our turnoff." "I don't know." The sign seemed old, weathered in a way that made me uneasy. "Come on, it might be a shortcut. This storm is getting worse." I didn't argue. The main road ahead was barely visible, and the detour looked recently plowed. So we turned. The scenic detour wasn't scenic at all. The road got narrower, the trees denser, blocking what little daylight remained. The snow was falling so heavily now that it felt like we were driving through a tunnel of white. 10 minutes in, the car started making a strange knocking sound. "What is that?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. Lily's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I don't know." The knocking got louder, and then there was a pop, a hiss, and the car lurched to the right before coming to a complete stop. Lily tried restarting it several times, but nothing happened. We were stuck. "Let me check under the hood," she said, pulling on her gloves. The moment she opened the door, the wind howled in, bringing with it a blast of snow and cold that took my breath away. She was back in less than a minute, her face red and her hair covered in snow. "It's the engine," she said, her voice tight. "Something's fried. We're not driving out of here." I checked my phone. No signal. Lily's was the same. "What do we do?" I asked, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. Lily pulled up her map app, which thankfully still worked without signal. According to this, there should be a ranger station about 2 miles back toward the main road. 2 miles in this? I gestured at the whiteout conditions outside. "We can't stay here," she said firmly. "The car will become a freezer without the engine running. We have to walk." So we bundled up in every layer we had, packed some snacks and water in our backpacks, and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit me like a physical blow, the wind driving snow into every exposed inch of skin. We linked arms to avoid losing each other and started walking in what we hoped was the right direction. The snow was already up to our knees in places, making each step a struggle. I couldn't feel my face or fingers after just 10 minutes. We kept going, heads down against the wind, following what we thought was the road, though it was impossible to tell for sure. The world had been reduced to white and gray, with occasional dark smudges of trees. After what felt like an hour but was probably only 40 minutes, Lily stopped suddenly. "Look!" she shouted over the wind, pointing ahead. At first I couldn't see anything through the swirling snow. Then a shape emerged, the outline of a building. Not the ranger station we were hoping for, but a cabin. "Thank God!" I breathed, relief flooding through me. As we got closer, I could make out more details. It was a large log cabin, the kind you see in magazines, perfect and pristine, with a stone chimney and a wide porch. Most strangely, the snow around it seemed lighter, as if the storm was somehow less severe in its immediate vicinity. The roof was barely covered, and the porch was completely clear. "This is weird," I said, slowing down. "Why isn't there more snow here?" Lily was already pushing ahead. "Who cares? It's shelter." The cabin door wasn't locked. It swung open easily when Lily turned the handle, revealing a warm, cozy interior. A fire was already burning in the stone fireplace. "Hello?" Lily called out. "Anyone home?" No answer. We stepped inside, closing the door behind us. The contrast between the howling storm outside and the peaceful warmth inside was jarring. The cabin was immaculate, rustic but comfortable, with wooden furniture, thick rugs, and copper lanterns casting a soft glow. A kettle sat on a wood-burning stove in the corner. There were bookshelves filled with old volumes, hunting trophies on the walls, and a rocking chair by the fire. "This place is incredible," Lily said, shedding her wet outer layers. "Maybe it's a rental that's not currently occupied?" "Then why is there a fire going?" I asked, unable to shake my uneasiness. She shrugged. "Maybe the owners just left, or someone else got stranded and is coming back." I walked around, taking in the details. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The cabin felt staged, like a set for a rustic lifestyle photo shoot. There were no personal items, no photos, nothing that indicated who might live there. And then I saw it. On a wooden table near the center of the room sat a porcelain doll. It had long black hair, pale skin, and was dressed in an old-fashioned blue dress with white lace trim. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow me as I moved, and its painted red lips were fixed in what looked like a knowing smile. "Lily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Look at this." She came over, frowning at the doll. "Creepy, but lots of mountain cabins have weird decor." "Doesn't this whole place seem strange to you? The fire was already lit. There's no snow around the cabin. The door was unlocked. And now this doll? Kayla, we just walked through a blizzard. We're lucky to have found shelter at all. Let's not question our good fortune." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion was setting in. My clothes were damp, my muscles ached, and the warmth of the cabin was making me drowsy. "Fine," I conceded, "but we should try to contact someone, let them know where we are." We searched the cabin but found no phone, no radio, nothing that could be used to communicate with the outside world. There was a kitchen stocked with canned goods, a bathroom with running water somehow, and a loft with 2 twin beds made up with clean sheets. "See, it's perfect," Lily said, testing one of the beds. "We can wait out the storm here, then walk back to the main road when it clears." I wasn't convinced, but I was too tired to argue. We heated up some canned soup we found in the kitchen, ate in silence, and then decided to get some sleep. It was only early evening, but the day had drained us completely. I took one of the beds in the loft while Lily took the other. Despite my exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. The wind outside had a strange, almost human quality to it, sometimes sounding like a wail, other times like laughter. I kept thinking about the doll downstairs, imagining its glass eyes staring up at the ceiling toward where we slept. I must have dozed off eventually, because I woke with a start to the sound of giggling, high-pitched, childlike, but somehow wrong. I sat up, disoriented. The cabin was dark except for the dim glow from the dying fire downstairs. Lily was still asleep in the other bed. The giggling came again, followed by a soft thump from downstairs. "Lily," I whispered, reaching over to shake her. "Wake up." She groaned and rolled over. "I heard something downstairs," I insisted. "It's probably just the wind," she mumbled, but she sat up reluctantly. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight as we crept down the loft stairs. The main room was shadowy, the fire reduced to embers. I swept my light around and froze. The doll was no longer on the wooden table. It was sitting in the armchair by the fire, its posture unnaturally straight, those glass eyes reflecting my flashlight beam. "Lily," I choked out, pointing. She saw it too. "What the hell?" "Someone moved it," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone's in here with us." We both spun around, scanning the shadows of the cabin. Nothing moved. "Maybe it fell off the table and someone put it in the chair before we got here," Lily suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. "And we just didn't notice until now? No way." I approached the chair cautiously, my light fixed on the doll. Its painted smile seemed wider somehow, more knowing. I reached out slowly to touch it. It was gone. Between one blink and the next, the doll had vanished from the chair. I stumbled backward, colliding with Lily. "Did you see that? It's gone!" Before she could respond, a soft voice came from the darkest corner of the room. "You touched my things." We whirled toward the sound. My flashlight beam caught a small figure stepping out of the shadows. It was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with long black hair and porcelain-pale skin. She wore a blue dress with white lace, identical to the doll's, but where her eyes should have been, there were only empty black sockets, like holes in her face. "You came to my house," she said in a sing-song voice that made my skin crawl. "But you didn't follow the rules. No one ever follows the rules." My body felt frozen, my brain unable to process what I was seeing. Beside me, Lily was trembling. "What rules?" she managed to ask. The girl's mouth stretched into a smile that was too wide for her face. "Never enter uninvited. Never touch what isn't yours. Never stay after dark." She tilted her head at an impossible angle. "You broke all 3. She took a step toward us, and I noticed with horror that her feet didn't quite touch the floor. "We're sorry," I stammered. "We didn't know. We'll leave right now." The girl's expression didn't change. "It's too late for that. You have to play with me now, forever and ever." Then she opened her mouth and let out a scream that no human child could possibly make, high and piercing, like metal scraping metal. The windows rattled, the fire flared up suddenly, and the temperature in the cabin plummeted so quickly I could see my breath. We ran. We didn't grab our coats or boots, didn't think about the storm outside, just ran straight for the door, yanked it open, and plunged into the snowy night. The girl's scream followed us, seeming to come from the air itself. The storm was still raging, the snow so thick I could barely see 2 feet ahead. Lily grabbed my hand and we stumbled through the drifts, the snow soaking through our socks, the cold biting at our exposed skin. I kept looking back, expecting to see the girl following us, but there was only swirling white. We ran until our lungs burned and our feet were numb, following what we hoped was the road. The darkness and the snow made it impossible to know which direction we were going. At some point, I realized Lily's hand was no longer in mine. "Lily!" I stopped, spinning around. "Lily!" My voice was swallowed by the storm. I called again and again, wandering in circles, but she was gone. I was alone. The cold was becoming unbearable. My wet clothes were freezing to my skin, and I couldn't feel my feet anymore. I knew I was going to die out here, that they would find my body when the snow melted in spring. Then I saw lights, distant at first, then growing brighter. The mechanical growl of an engine cut through the howling wind. A snowplow. I stood in its path, waving my arms frantically, praying the driver would see me. He did. The plow stopped, and a man in a thick winter coat jumped out, looking shocked to find someone on foot in the blizzard. "Jesus Christ, what are you doing out here?" he shouted over the wind, hurrying to wrap his coat around me. I couldn't stop shaking enough to speak. He helped me into the cab of the plow, cranked up the heat, and gave me a thermos of coffee. As warmth slowly returned to my body, I managed to tell him about Lily, about how we got separated. He radioed it in, and within an hour, search and rescue teams were combing the area. They never found her. They never found the cabin either. According to the authorities, there are no structures of any kind on the stretch of road where we supposedly took the detour. In fact, they claim there is no detour at all, no sign for Hollow Creek, no scenic route, nothing but unbroken forest for miles. They found our car, though, crashed into a tree just off the main highway, nowhere near where I remember leaving it. The official report says we must have skidded on the ice, hit the tree, and then I wandered off disoriented from a concussion while Lily remained in the car and froze to death. But they never found her body. I've been back there 3 times since it happened, in better weather, trying to find that detour, that cabin. Nothing. I've researched the area extensively, looking for any mention of Hollow Creek or stories about a cabin with a porcelain doll. The closest I've found are old legends about children who got lost in those woods during the 19th century, children who were never found. Sometimes at night, I wake up to the sound of giggling. I tell myself it's just dreams, just trauma. But 2 days ago, I came home from work and found something on my kitchen table. A small blue hair ribbon with white lace trim, just like the one on the doll. I've been hesitating to post this for months, but I need to get it off my chest. Even now, 6 months later, my hands are shaking just typing this out. This happened back in January, when I was driving from Portland to Spokane to surprise my sister for her birthday. It's something I do every year. She never expects it, and her reaction is always worth the 7-hour drive. This year, though, I almost didn't make it. I'd been watching the weather all week. They'd been predicting snow, but nothing major. Just a few inches, nothing my Honda Civic with decent all-season tires couldn't handle. I've driven through winter conditions plenty of times. I thought I was prepared. That morning, I grabbed my overnight bag, made a thermos of coffee, and hit the road around 10 a.m. I figured I'd make it to her place by dinner time, crash on her couch, and be there when she woke up on her birthday. The sky looked threatening when I left Portland. Dark clouds hanging low, but no precipitation yet. About 3 hours in, somewhere east of the Dalles, the snow started. Just light flurries at first. I remember thinking it looked pretty, the way it danced in my headlights. The forecast had said 1 to 3 inches, so I wasn't worried. I turned up my podcast and kept driving. By the time I reached Pendleton, things had changed dramatically. The light snow had turned into what I can only describe as a full-on blizzard. The wind was whipping across the highway, creating whiteout conditions in some spots. My windshield wipers were barely keeping up. I couldn't see more than maybe 20 feet ahead of me. The interstate was almost empty. Most people had the good sense to stay off the roads, I guess. I seriously considered turning around, but I was already more than halfway there, and I hate breaking traditions. Plus, cell service was spotty, and I couldn't get enough signal to check for alternate routes or updated weather reports. So I kept going, stupidly, stubbornly. I crawled along at maybe 25 stage, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every now and then, my tires would lose traction for a second, and my heart would jump into my throat. The snow was coming down so thick that the world had shrunk to just me, my car, and this tunnel of white. After what felt like forever, my gas light came on. I was down to a quarter tank, and I had no idea how much farther I'd need to go in these conditions. I started anxiously scanning the roadside for any signs of civilization. There's not much out there on that stretch of I-84 in normal weather, let alone during a blizzard. When I finally spotted a gas station sign glowing through the snow, I nearly cried with relief. I carefully took the exit, feeling my car slide a little on what was probably a sheet of ice beneath the fresh snow. The station looked old and run down, one of those independent places you find in the middle of nowhere, but at that point, I didn't care. There was a light on inside, which meant it was open. I pulled up to a pump and just sat there for a minute, trying to psych myself up to face the freezing wind. When I finally stepped out, the cold hit me like a physical blow. The snow immediately stuck to my hair, my eyelashes, my coat, everything. I swiped my card, pumped the gas as quickly as I could, then hurried inside to warm up and maybe grab a coffee. The interior was dim and dated, worn linoleum floors, flickering fluorescent lights, dusty shelves of snacks that looked like they'd been there for years. But it was warm, and that was all that mattered. There was only one other customer inside, a tall, lean man in a dark blue parka with the hood drawn tight around his face. He was standing by the coffee station, but he wasn't making coffee. He was just standing there, watching. When I walked in, he turned to look at me, and I felt something cold run down my spine that had nothing to do with the snow melting off my coat. His eyes were pale, so pale they looked almost colorless in that bad lighting, and they seemed to take in everything about me in one sweep. Not just how I looked, but like who I was, what I was doing there, whether I was alone. I tried to act normal. I grabbed a coffee cup with hands that were still numb from the cold and filled it, keeping my back to him but feeling his gaze on me the whole time. When I went to pay, he was suddenly right behind me in line, though I hadn't heard him move. He smelled like cigarettes and something else I couldn't identify, something sharp and unpleasant. The cashier was an older man who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. I paid quickly, hoping the man in the parka would stay to make his own purchase. As I headed back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him still standing at the counter, those pale eyes watching me through the window. I got into my car, locked the doors immediately, and sat there sipping my coffee, trying to warm up before getting back on the road. That's when I noticed him leaving the store. He didn't have a coffee or any purchases that I could see. He walked directly to a large, dark pickup truck parked on the other side of the lot, one of those heavy-duty ones with big tires and a lift kit. I figured he'd drive away, but he didn't. He just sat in his truck, engine running, lights off, watching me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Of course he wasn't watching me specifically. He was probably just warming up his truck before hitting the road again, same as me. But something felt wrong. Something about the way he'd looked at me in the store, like I was prey. I decided I'd waited long enough. I put my coffee in the cup holder, started my car, and pulled out of the station back toward the highway. As I merged onto the on-ramp, I checked my rear-view mirror. Headlights appeared behind me. The truck. For a moment, I told myself it was just coincidence. We were both heading the same direction on the only plowed road for miles. But the timing felt deliberate, like he'd waited for me to leave first. I kept driving, pushing my little Civic as fast as I dared in the conditions. The truck stayed behind me, not tailgating, but maintaining the exact same distance. When I sped up slightly, it sped up. When I had to slow down for a patch of deeper snow, it slowed too. After about 15 minutes of this, I decided to test my theory. I put on my blinker and pulled over onto the shoulder as if I needed to check something with my car. The truck slowed dramatically but didn't pull over immediately. It crept past me, going maybe 10 mph, and I couldn't see the driver through the tinted windows. Then, about 50 yards ahead, it pulled over too. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I sat there, engine running, lights on, watching the truck in the distance. For about 2 minutes, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. The man in the parka got out and started walking back toward my car through the falling snow. I panicked and locked my doors again, though they were already locked. I had pepper spray in my glove compartment, a gift from my dad when I moved to Portland, and I grabbed it, holding it tightly in my right hand. He approached my passenger window and made a "roll down your window" gesture. I cracked it about an inch. "Having car trouble?" he asked. His voice was higher pitched than I expected, almost gentle, but it didn't match his eyes. Those eyes were still cold, calculating. "No," I said. "Just checking my GPS. Signal's bad out here." He nodded slowly. Nasty weather to be out driving, especially all alone. The way he emphasized alone made my skin crawl. "I'm meeting people," I lied. "They're expecting me." "Where you headed?" he asked, leaning closer to the crack in my window. "Just up to Spokane," I said, immediately regretting giving him real information. "My boyfriend's waiting for me." Another lie. He smiled then, a wide, unnatural smile that showed too many teeth. "That's where I'm headed too. We should caravan together. Safer that way with the roads like this. If one of us gets stuck, the other can help." Every alarm bell in my body was ringing. "No thanks," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm fine." His smile disappeared instantly. "You sure? Young lady like you shouldn't be out here alone in weather like this. Anything could happen." The way he said it, it wasn't concern. It was almost like a threat. "I'm good," I insisted, putting my car in drive. "Thanks anyway." Before he could respond, I pulled away, tires spinning slightly in the snow before catching. In my rear-view mirror, I saw him standing in the road, watching me drive away. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. I drove as fast as I safely could, constantly checking my mirrors. Within minutes, I saw headlights behind me again. The same truck, keeping pace about 100 yards back. For the next hour, he followed me, never getting too close, never falling too far behind. Just there, constant, patient. Occasionally, when the road widened to 2 lanes, I'd slow down, hoping he'd pass me. He never did. He'd just slow down too, maintaining that same distance. I was running low on options. I couldn't outrun him in these conditions. His truck would handle the snow much better than my Civic. I couldn't pull over at another gas station. What if there wasn't anyone else around? The next real town was still miles away. My phone still had no service, so I couldn't call for help. Then, about 20 miles later, I saw a state trooper parked in the median with lights flashing, apparently helping another car that had slid off the road. I slowed as I passed, watching my rearview mirror intently. The truck suddenly veered onto an exit ramp, disappearing from view. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Had the sight of the police scared him off? Was he just exiting for his own reasons? I didn't know, and I didn't care. He was gone. I drove another half hour without seeing him, gradually allowing myself to relax slightly. The snow was still coming down hard, but I was making progress. According to my GPS, which was working intermittently, I had about 2 more hours to go. Then I saw it. The truck, his truck, parked on the shoulder ahead with its lights off. As my headlights illuminated it, I could see there was no one in the driver's seat. He was waiting, watching. As I passed, the truck's headlights suddenly flicked on, and it pulled onto the road behind me. That's when I truly panicked. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't my imagination. This man was hunting me. I took the next exit without signaling, tires sliding dangerously as I made the sharp turn too fast. It led to a rural highway I wasn't familiar with, but at that point, any road away from him seemed better than continuing as we were. The truck followed, gaining on me now. I pushed my car to 50 mph, then 60, far too fast for the conditions, but terror had overridden my caution. The road curved through farmland, completely unlit except for my headlights. I had no idea where I was going. About 5 miles down this road, I saw a sign for a sharp right turn. I waited until the last possible second, then cut the wheel hard. My car fishtailed, nearly spinning out, but somehow I kept control. I killed my headlights as soon as I made the turn, plunging myself into darkness. About 100 yards down this side road, there was a dirt driveway leading to what looked like a barn or large shed. I quickly pulled in, positioning my car so it wasn't visible from the main road, then cut the engine and sat in terrified silence. Seconds later, I heard the truck roar past the turnoff, continuing down the main road. Its headlights briefly illuminated the trees around me as it passed, and then it was gone. I sat there, shaking, for what must have been 20 minutes. Part of me was afraid he'd realize I'd turned and come back, but there was no sign of him. Eventually, I turned my car back on, pulled out my GPS, and found an alternate route to Spokane. It would take longer, but it avoided the interstate where he'd been hunting me. For the rest of the drive, I was a wreck, jumping at every set of headlights, convinced every vehicle I saw was him somehow finding me again. But I made it to my sister's apartment around 11 p.m., nearly 3 hours later than planned. I didn't tell her what had happened. I didn't want to scare her, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I'd overreacted. Maybe he really was just concerned about a woman driving alone in a blizzard. Maybe I'd imagined the predatory look in his eyes, the deliberate way he'd waited for me. But the next morning, as we were having coffee, a local news alert popped up on her phone. There had been multiple reports of a suspicious vehicle following women on the same stretch of I-84 I'd been on. The report included a grainy photo from a gas station security camera of a dark pickup truck similar to the one that had followed me. The police were asking anyone with information to come forward. I felt sick. I still do, thinking about it. I called the number in the report and told them what had happened to me, but I don't know if it helped. The detective I spoke with said they'd had at least 3 other reports of similar incidents in the past month, all involving a man in a dark truck following women traveling alone on that highway. It's been 6 months, and they still haven't caught him, as far as I know. I check the local news from that area sometimes, dreading the day I'll see a headline about a woman who wasn't as lucky as I was. I drove back to Portland a different route, even though it took almost 10 hours instead of 7. I haven't driven alone at night since then. I installed extra locks on my apartment door, and I've taken self-defense classes. But the worst part is the constant looking over my shoulder. Every time I see a dark pickup truck, my heart races. Every time headlights stay behind me for too long, I start planning escape routes. I keep wondering, what if he got my license plate? What if he knows where I live? What would have happened if I hadn't seen that state trooper, or if I hadn't made that turn when I did? I don't think I'll ever know what his intentions were that night. But whatever they were, I'm certain they weren't good. No one follows a stranger for hours in a blizzard just to make sure they get home safe. So now I have a new tradition. Instead of driving to see my sister, she comes to visit me. And I check my rearview mirror every 5 seconds, no matter where I'm going. Because I can't shake the feeling that someday I'll look in that mirror and see him again, the man with the pale eyes and the smile that showed too many teeth. I still haven't driven since it happened in February. I've been taking the bus everywhere for the past 3 months. My therapist says I need to get back behind the wheel eventually, but every time I think about it, my palms start sweating and I feel like I can't breathe. Mark keeps offering to help me practice driving, but I can't even look at his car without feeling sick. Ellie understands better. She hasn't been on a road trip since either. It was supposed to be a fun semester break trip, just 3 days in a cabin in the Catskills to decompress after finals week. Mark's uncle owned a place up there that he barely used during winter, and he'd offered it to us for free. We were broke college students, so free sounded perfect. I remember being excited as we packed up Mark's Honda Civic that morning. The forecast mentioned snow, but nothing major, just enough to make the mountains look pretty. Mark was driving, Ellie was in charge of music, and I was navigator with my phone's GPS. We stopped for coffee and donuts at around 7 a.m., and Mark joked about finally escaping the college bubble for a few days. The first 2 hours of the drive were completely normal. We sang along to 2000's pop songs, talked about our plans for next semester, and Ellie told us about this guy she'd been talking to on Tinder. Everything was fine until we started climbing into the mountains and the weather shifted suddenly. 1 minute we could see blue sky, and the next it was just white. The snow started coming down in these thick, heavy sheets that made it impossible to see more than 20 feet ahead. Mark slowed down to about 15 miles, leaning forward over the steering wheel like that would somehow help him see better. Maybe we should pull over and wait it out, I suggested, after we'd been creeping along for about 40 minutes. My eyes were getting tired from squinting at the white road. We're already more than halfway there, Mark said. If we stop now, we might get snowed in somewhere random. Better to push through to the cabin. Ellie agreed with him, and I didn't push it. That's something I've replayed in my mind over and over. I should have insisted. We kept going, the wipers barely keeping up with the snow. The roads got narrower as we climbed higher, and I was starting to lose cell service. My GPS kept glitching, the blue dot jumping around on the screen. That's when we saw him. There was this single streetlight on a bend in the road, the kind that flickers like it's about to die. Standing right under it was a man in a dark green parka. He was waving both arms over his head like he was directing an airplane. Mark slowed down even more. What's this guy doing in the middle of nowhere? Just keep driving, I said. Something about the guy made the hair on my arms stand up. Maybe it was how he was just waiting there in a snowstorm. But Mark stopped the car about 10 feet from him. He rolled his window down a crack and freezing air rushed in. The man moved to the driver's side window, and I got a better look at him. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with this weathered face and a patchy gray beard. His eyes were really pale, almost colorless in the weird light. "Road's closed up ahead," he said, pointing further up the mountain. "Tree came down in the storm. You folks trying to get somewhere?" Mark told him about his uncle's cabin and tried to show him on his phone, but there was no service. The man nodded like he knew exactly where Mark was talking about. "You can't get there from the main road today," he said, "but there's a service road about half a mile back that'll take you around. It's longer, but it's clear. I work for the County Road Commission," he added, though I didn't see any vehicle nearby or any kind of uniform or ID. I leaned forward so I could see him better. "Why are you just standing out here in the storm?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Waiting for the tow truck. My car slid off about an hour ago." He gestured vaguely behind him, but I couldn't see any car through the snow. Mark thanked him and rolled up the window. "We should take the detour," he said. "I don't like it," I replied immediately. Why would a county worker be standing alone in a snowstorm? Where's his car? Where's his radio or phone? Something's off. "He probably walked from wherever his car is," Ellie said from the back seat. "Maybe he couldn't get service either." "We can keep going and see if the road is actually closed," I suggested. "If it is, we can always turn around." Mark shook his head. "If we get stuck up there and have to back down these narrow roads in this weather, we're screwed. The detour makes sense." I wanted to argue more, but I felt stupid for being so paranoid. It was just a guy trying to help, right? So I shut up, and Mark turned the car around. The man watched us go, still standing under that flickering light. I looked back and saw him pull something out of his pocket. It looked like a phone. So much for no service. We found the turnoff just where he said it would be, a narrow, unmarked road cutting into the dense woods. It wasn't plowed, but someone had driven through recently enough that we could follow their tracks. "See," Mark said, "other people have gone this way." The road wound deeper into the forest, taking us farther from the main highway. The trees were so thick on either side that it felt like we were driving through a tunnel. After about 20 minutes, I completely lost my GPS signal. My phone showed a blank map with our blue dot in the middle of nowhere. "Guys, I don't like this," I said again. "We've been on this road too long. It should have connected back to the main road by now." "It's a detour," Ellie said. "It's supposed to be longer." But the uneasiness in my stomach was growing. The tracks we'd been following suddenly split in two directions at a fork in the road. Mark hesitated, then took the left path, which seemed slightly more traveled. 5 minutes later, the trees suddenly opened up into a small clearing, and there it was, a cabin, not Mark's uncle's cabin. This one was smaller, older, with a sagging porch and wood that had gone gray with age. Smoke was coming from the chimney, and there was an old pickup truck parked out front, almost completely covered in snow. Mark stopped the car. "Maybe they know if we're going the right way." "Let's just turn around," I pleaded. "This doesn't feel right." "We're lost. It's snowing harder, and it's getting dark," Mark pointed out. "I'm just going to ask for directions." Before I could stop him, he'd gotten out of the car and was trudging through the knee-deep snow toward the cabin. Ellie and I watched through the foggy windows as he knocked on the door. It opened after a few seconds, and I could make out a figure standing in the doorway, tall and thin, wrapped in what looked like multiple sweaters or blankets. I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman from that distance. Mark talked with them for a minute, then turned and waved for us to come inside. "No way," I said immediately. Ellie hesitated. "It's really cold in the car without the heat running. Maybe just for a few minutes, to warm up and figure out where we are." I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to sit alone in the car. So, against every instinct I had, I followed Ellie out into the snow. The woman who'd answered the door was incredibly thin, with long gray hair hanging in greasy strands around her face. Her skin was pale and almost translucent, stretched tight over her bones. She wore at least 3 different sweaters layered on top of each other, all in different faded colors. come in," she said in a raspy voice. "Storm's getting worse. Nobody should be out driving today." The inside of the cabin was dim, lit only by a wood stove and a few lanterns. It was one large room with a small kitchen area, a table, and a couple of beds pushed against the back wall. The place was cluttered with stuff, piles of clothes, stacks of books and newspapers, tools, canned food. It looked like they never threw anything away. "My husband's gone to get more firewood," the woman said, though I hadn't asked. "You kids look half frozen. Sit by the stove." I didn't want to sit. I stood near the door, taking everything in. Mark and Ellie sat on 2 wooden chairs near the wood stove. The heat felt good after the car, but I couldn't relax. There was something about the cabin that felt wrong, like it wasn't really a home, but a collection of random things. Near a pile of boots by the door, I noticed a car key with a Honda logo and a phone case, one of those custom photo ones. I moved slightly to see the picture, and my blood went cold. I recognized it. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been scrolling through Instagram when I saw a missing person post being shared around campus. A sophomore had gone home for a weekend and never made it. The post had included a picture of him with his girlfriend, and they were using matching custom phone cases with that exact photo. My mouth went dry. I tried to catch Mark's eye, but he was asking the woman about how to get back to the main road. I edged closer to Ellie and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." She looked at me like I was overreacting, but must have seen something in my face that convinced her I was serious. She nodded slightly. "Thank you for letting us warm up," I said loudly, interrupting Mark mid-sentence. "But we should get going before it gets any darker." The woman's head snapped toward me, her movements oddly jerky. "Oh, you can't leave now. The storm's too bad. You should stay until my husband gets back. He knows all the roads around here." "We really need to get to our cabin," I insisted. "Our friends are expecting us." It was a lie. Nobody knew exactly when we were supposed to arrive. "At least stay for some tea," she said, already moving toward the kitchen area, "to warm you up for the drive." That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps outside. Not one person, multiple sets of boots crunching through snow, coming toward the cabin from different directions. "Your husband's back," Mark said, smiling. The woman didn't smile back. She just stared at the door, her head tilted slightly, listening. Then she looked at me, and I swear her eyes changed, went from a faded blue to something darker. "That's not my husband," she said softly. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I grabbed Ellie's arm and yanked her up. "We're leaving, now!" Mark started to protest, but I cut him off. "Keys, now!" Something in my voice must have finally gotten through to him, because he handed them over without arguing. I pulled the door open and pushed Ellie out first, then Mark. The footsteps had stopped, but I could feel people watching us from the edges of the clearing, hidden among the trees. "Run!" I shouted, slamming the door behind us. We sprinted through the snow back to the car. It was like running through molasses. The snow kept giving way beneath us, making every step a struggle. Behind us, I heard the cabin door bang open. I fumbled with the keys, nearly dropping them in the snow before managing to unlock the car. We all dove in, and I started the engine with shaking hands. As I threw the car into reverse, I saw them, 4 figures emerging from different points around the clearing. 3 men and another woman, all dressed in dark, heavy clothes. They weren't running, just walking purposefully toward our car. The woman from the cabin stood on the porch, watching. I hit the gas harder than I meant to. and the car fishtailed as we reversed down the narrow path we'd come in on. The side mirror clipped a tree, shattering it, but I kept going. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Ellie was repeating from the back seat. Mark was silent, his face pale as he stared ahead. I had to focus on driving, backing up far enough to find a spot to turn around. When I finally did, and got us facing the right direction, I switched to drive and pressed the gas again. As we passed the fork where we'd turned left earlier, I took the right path instead, praying it would lead us back to the main road. No one spoke. The only sound was our heavy breathing and the wheels crunching through snow. After what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, the trees thinned out, and we emerged onto a plowed road. I recognized a sign. We were back on the main highway, about 5 miles past where we'd seen the man in the green parka. "There was never a downed tree," I said, my voice shaking. "He sent us there on purpose." We drove to the nearest town and went straight to the police station. The officer at the desk listened to our story, but I could tell he didn't fully believe us. He said they'd send someone to check it out, but with the storm getting worse, it might not be until tomorrow. We found a motel and got a room, too scared to continue to the cabin. None of us slept. We just sat there, jumping at every sound outside our room. The next morning, an officer called Mark's cell. They'd found the service road and followed it, but there was no cabin in any clearing. Just endless trees and undisturbed snow, like no one had driven or walked there in days. We drove home that day, the trip abandoned. A week later, I saw another missing person post. A couple who'd gone skiing in the same mountains hadn't returned when expected. I keep thinking about those boots by the door, the car key, the phone case. How many people had taken that detour? How many hadn't made it back to their car? I don't know what would have happened if we'd stayed for tea or waited for the husband to return. I don't know who those people in the woods were. I don't know if the cabin really wasn't there when the police checked, or if they just didn't go far enough down the right path. All I know is that sometimes I dream about that woman's face, the way her eyes changed when she heard the footsteps. And I wake up wondering how many other helpful strangers are standing by roadsides during storms, waiting to direct lost travelers down their own private detours. I still can't drive. I don't know if I ever will again. And I'll never take a detour, no matter who suggests it. I've been meaning to write this down for months now. I still get goosebumps thinking about it, and my therapist says putting it into words might help. So here goes. This happened last January. I'd been going through a rough patch. Work was insane. I'd just broken up with my boyfriend of 3 years, and my anxiety was through the roof. I needed to get away, clear my head. I've always loved driving, especially in winter when everything looks so pristine and quiet. So I decided to take a weekend road trip up to my aunt's cabin in the mountains. She wasn't using it, and I figured a few days of solitude would do me good. I packed light, just some clothes, food, my laptop, though I promised myself I wouldn't check work emails, and my trusty pocket knife that I've carried everywhere since college. I left early Friday morning, around 5 a.m., wanting to beat traffic and make it to the cabin before dark. The first few hours of the drive were exactly what I needed. I had my favorite playlist going, the roads were mostly empty, and watching the sunrise over the mountains was breathtaking. I stopped at this cute little diner for breakfast around 8, had the best blueberry pancakes, and felt myself actually relaxing for the first time in months. The weather forecast had mentioned a chance of snow, but nothing major. As I got deeper into the mountains, I noticed the sky darkening a bit, but I wasn't too concerned. I'd driven in snow plenty of times before, and my Subaru handles well in winter conditions. Plus, I was only about 2 hours from the cabin at that point. Around noon, the snow started, just light flurries at first. I turned on the local radio station to check for updates, and they were saying a system was moving in faster than expected, but the roads should remain passable. I decided to press on rather than turn back. That was my first mistake. Within an hour, the light snow had turned into a full-on storm. Visibility dropped dramatically, and I had to slow to about 30 mph. The roads weren't plowed yet, and I could feel my tires struggling for traction in certain spots. To make matters worse, my GPS started glitching, probably due to the remote location and the weather. The signal kept cutting out, showing me in the middle of nowhere, then jumping to different spots on the map. I was starting to get nervous, but told myself to stay calm. I knew roughly where I was, still on Route 16, heading north through a stretch with very few towns. The next proper town was Riverdale, about 40 minutes ahead if I maintained my current speed. I figured I could stop there, maybe wait out the worst of the storm at a motel if necessary. That's when I noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first I was relieved. Another person on this deserted stretch of road meant I wasn't completely alone if something happened. The vehicle was pretty far back, just visible through the curtain of snow. But as the minutes passed, I realized something odd. Despite the terrible road conditions and my slow pace, this vehicle, which I could now see was some kind of pickup truck, was maintaining the exact same distance behind me, not getting closer, not falling back, just there, matching my speed precisely. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they were just being cautious, using my taillights as a guide through the storm. That made sense, right? But then I decided to test something. I gradually increased my speed from 30 to about 45 mph, faster than was safe in these conditions. The truck sped up too, maintaining that same distance. My heart started beating faster. I slowed down again, almost to a crawl at 20 mph. The truck slowed too. Coincidence, I whispered to myself, but the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. I turned up the radio to drown out my thoughts, but the static was getting worse as the storm intensified. I was maybe 25 minutes from Riverdale now. The snow was coming down so hard that my windshield wipers could barely keep up. The road had narrowed, with steep embankments on either side. No houses, no businesses, nothing but wilderness. That's when the truck suddenly accelerated and closed the gap between us. It was right on my bumper now, so close I couldn't even see its headlights in my rearview mirror anymore. Just the grille of what I now recognized as a dark-colored Ford F-150, maybe 5 or 10 years old. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "What the hell do you want?" I said out loud, though of course they couldn't hear me. I sped up again, pushing 50 mph despite the dangerous conditions. The truck stayed right on me. I tried to remember if there was anything weird about my car that might make someone suspicious. Had I cut someone off earlier without realizing it? Was this some kind of road rage situation? But I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour before this truck appeared. Then I saw it. A small turnoff to the right. It wasn't on my planned route, just a smaller county road that probably led to some rural properties. There was no sign indicating where it went, just a small reflector marking the turn. On impulse, I hit my brakes and made a sharp right onto this road, hoping to lose my pursuer. For a moment, I thought it had worked. The truck continued straight, its taillights disappearing into the snow. I exhaled shakily, slowing down on this unplowed side road. But my relief lasted exactly 15 seconds. just long enough for the truck to back up and make the turn after me. I could feel panic rising in my chest. This was no coincidence. They were following me deliberately. I grabbed my phone, no signal. Of course, I was in the mountains during a snowstorm on some random back road. The side road was even worse than the highway, narrower, twistier, with deeper snow. I was going maybe 15 miles now, searching desperately for any sign of civilization. The truck had backed off slightly, but was still there, still following. After what felt like forever but was probably only 10 minutes, I saw something up ahead, a small concrete building set back from the road with a gravel parking area. A rest stop, old and probably unmaintained, but a structure nonetheless. I could see a faded sign for restrooms and a small covered area with what might have once been vending machines. I made a split-second decision and pulled in, parking my car right in front of the building. Maybe there would be people inside. Maybe there was a landline phone. Maybe the truck would just keep going. It didn't. The Ford pulled in right behind me, blocking my car. Through the swirling snow and gathering darkness, it was only about 2 p.m. but looked like dusk. I watched in horror as the driver's door opened. A man got out, then the passenger door opened too. 2 men, both wearing dark winter jackets with hoods pulled up. From their builds, I guessed they were in their 30s or 40s, strong-looking. They stood by their truck for a moment, looking at my car, then started walking toward me. I had seconds to decide what to do. I couldn't drive away. They were blocking me in. I couldn't outrun them in the snow. I couldn't call for help. I grabbed my pocket knife from the center console, shoved it in my jacket pocket, snatched my phone, useless as it was, and made a dash for the rest stop building. If there were other people inside, I'd be safer. If not, at least the building might have another exit or places to hide. The rest stop was tiny and eerily quiet. A small open area with empty vending machine slots, 2 bathroom doors, both locked, and a counter where maybe an attendant once sat. No people, no phone. The only light came from a single window, casting everything in gray shadows. The place smelled musty, like it hadn't been used in months. I could hear the men's boots on the gravel outside. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, clutching my pocket knife. The door swung open. "Hello?" one of them called out. His voice was casual, almost friendly. "Anyone in here?" I didn't answer. I could see them now, one tall and thin, the other shorter but broad-shouldered. The tall one stepped inside first, scanning the room. "We saw you pull in," he said, still in that conversational tone. "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. Nasty storm out there." I remained silent, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. "We're not going to hurt you," the broad-shouldered one said, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. "Just want to talk." That's when the tall one spotted me, pressed against the wall. "Oh, there you are." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You shouldn't be out here all alone. Roads are dangerous today." I finally found my voice. "My husband is expecting me," I lied. "He knows exactly where I am. He's probably already called the police since I'm late." The men exchanged a look. "Is that right?" the tall one said. "Funny, we haven't seen any other cars on this road for hours, and cell service is down all through these mountains because of the storm." They were moving closer now, positioning themselves between me and the door. I gripped my knife tighter in my pocket, flicking it open without removing it. If they came any closer... "We just want to talk," the shorter one repeated, taking another step toward me. "Maybe give you a ride somewhere safer than this old place. Our truck handles real good in the snow." "I'm fine here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm waiting for the storm to pass." "Could be waiting a long time," the tall one said. Weather report says this is going to last all night. We've got a warm cabin not far from here. You'd be comfortable there." Another step closer. I could smell them now, cigarettes and something else, something chemical. My back was literally against the wall. I had nowhere to go except the locked bathroom doors, which wouldn't hold them off for long. The shorter one reached out his hand. "Come on now, don't be—" And then it happened. A sudden flood of light through the window, bright enough to make us all turn and look. The mechanical growl of a large engine. A snowplow, its yellow warning lights flashing, had pulled into the rest stop. The two men froze. The tall one swore under his breath. "County must have finally sent someone to clear this back road," he muttered to his friend. Then to me, with that same fake smile, "Looks like you'll get home safe after all. Lucky you." They backed away toward the door. The shorter one hesitated, looking at me one last time. "Maybe we'll see you around," he said. There was something in his voice that made my blood run cold. Then they were gone, hurrying back to their truck. I watched through the window as they backed out, careful to avoid the snowplow, and disappeared down the road. I collapsed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. The door opened again and I raised my knife, but it was just the snowplow driver, an older man with a gray beard and a Department of Transportation uniform. "You okay, miss?" he asked, looking concerned. "Saw that truck pull away mighty fast. Those guys bothering you?" I could barely speak through my tears of relief. I managed to explain what had happened while he radioed in to report the incident. He offered to escort me to Riverdale, where there was a sheriff's station, and I gratefully accepted. The sheriff took my statement but didn't seem very hopeful about catching the men. "Black Ford F-150s are a dime a dozen around here," he said, and with no plates. I hadn't even thought to look at their license plate in my panic. I ended up staying at a motel in Riverdale that night. I couldn't stop shaking. Every sound made me jump. I pushed a dresser in front of the door even though I'd engaged every lock. The next morning, the storm had cleared. The sheriff's deputy who took my follow-up statement told me they'd had reports of similar incidents in the past few months. Lone drivers being followed on remote roads during bad weather. No one had been hurt yet, but they were taking it seriously. I drove straight home that day, skipping the cabin entirely. I couldn't bear the thought of being alone in the mountains anymore. It's been 7 months now, and I still have nightmares about those men. About what might have happened if that snowplow hadn't shown up when it did. I've gone back to driving for pleasure occasionally, even taken a couple of winter road trips. But things are different now. I carry a real pepper spray, not just a pocket knife. I have a GPS tracker that my sister monitors when I'm on the road. I keep my gas tank full, my phone charged, and I never ever take unmarked side roads. Sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, those two men in the black truck, waiting for the next snowstorm and the next lone driver. I wonder how many others they've followed, and if everyone was as lucky as I was. The thing that haunts me most is that smile, so casual, so practiced. We just want to talk, like they'd done this before, like they knew exactly what they were doing. And I'll never know what would have happened next if that snowplow hadn't come. I still have nightmares about that figure in the snow. It's been almost 3 months since our trip to northern Michigan, but I can't shake the memory of that face pressed against our car window. I've never been the superstitious type, but what happened that day at Hollow Creek changed everything I thought I knew about the world. It started as a perfect winter adventure. Zoe and I had been planning this trip for months, a photography expedition to capture Michigan's frozen waterfalls. We'd been best friends since college, bonded by our love for nature photography and off-the-beaten-path adventures. This was supposed to be our big winter project, something for both our portfolios. Zoe specializes in landscape photography, while I focus more on the technical aspects of capturing water in motion. We left early on a Tuesday morning in January, my Subaru packed with camera gear, emergency supplies, and enough snacks to last a week. The first 2 days were absolutely magical. The Upper Peninsula in winter is like something from a fairy tale. Pristine snow blanketing everything, ice formations that look like they're straight out of Narnia, and the frozen waterfalls. My God, they were spectacular. Like time had stopped mid-flow. We got some incredible shots at Tahquamenon Falls and several smaller cascades. The trouble started on our 3rd day. We'd planned to hit some lesser-known falls along Highway 68, working our way south. The weather forecast had mentioned a possibility of snow, but nothing severe. Michigan weather is notoriously unpredictable, but we're both experienced enough to know how to prepare. At least, I thought we were. That morning, the sky had a strange quality to it, a heavy grayness that seemed to press down on the landscape. Zoe noticed it first as we loaded up the car. "Think we should skip today?" she asked, zipping up her parka while glancing at the sky. "Nah, we've got the chains and emergency kit. Probably just some light snow," I replied, too excited about the day's destinations to consider turning back. That was my first mistake. We'd been driving for about an hour when the snow started. At first, it was just a few flakes dancing in front of the windshield. Beautiful, actually. I remember Zoe grabbing her camera from the back seat to try and capture the way the light was filtering through the clouds. But within 20 minutes, those innocent flakes transformed into something menacing. The wind picked up dramatically, hurling snow sideways across the road. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet, then 30, then barely past our hood. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, slowing to a crawl. Highway 68 isn't exactly a major thoroughfare in winter, and we hadn't seen another car in at least half an hour. To our left and right stretched nothing but vast snow-covered fields and distant tree lines. The howling of the wind made it sound like the car was surrounded by wild animals. "Jesus, this came out of nowhere," Zoe muttered, putting her camera away. I could hear the concern in her voice. "Maybe we should turn back." I checked the GPS. The next town was about 30 miles ahead, and we'd already come 20 miles from the last one. Neither option seemed great in these conditions. That's when I spotted the sign through the curtain of snow. Hollow Creek Rest Area, 1 mile. I'd never heard of it before, but a rest area meant a parking lot, maybe some kind of shelter where we could wait out the worst of the storm. "Let's pull over at this rest stop coming up," I suggested. "We can check the weather radar and see if this is going to pass quickly." Zoe nodded, relief evident on her face. "Good call." I carefully navigated the exit ramp, which hadn't been plowed recently. The Subaru slid slightly before the tires found purchase again. The rest area was little more than a clearing with a small log structure that probably housed bathrooms, a couple of picnic tables now buried under snow, and a parking lot with space for maybe 10 vehicles. It was completely deserted. I parked as close to the building as possible, but the bathrooms had a chain across the door with a sign reading, "Closed for winter season." Great. "Looks like we're camping in the car for a bit," I said, trying to sound upbeat. I turned up the heat and pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. Zoe checked hers too. Same result. "Guess we just wait," she sighed, leaning back in her seat. We sat there for about 20 minutes, listening to the radio for weather updates and watching the snow pile up around us. The sky had darkened to an ominous charcoal gray, despite it being only 2 p.m. The wind rocked the car occasionally, sending waves of snow washing over the windshield. I was just beginning to wonder if we should try to press on when Zoe suddenly sat up straight, her body tensing. "What's that?" she whispered, pointing through the passenger window toward the tree line about 30 yards away. At first, I couldn't see anything through the whirling snow. Then a shadow moved, a dark silhouette emerging from between the pines, walking with a strange, stiff gait toward the rest area. As it got closer, I could make out that it was a man. "Maybe his car broke down?" I suggested, though something about the way he moved sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. As he got closer, details became clearer, and they made less and less sense. He was wearing jeans, torn at the knees, a thin sweater, and an unbuttoned coat that flapped in the violent wind. No hat, no gloves, no proper boots, just what looked like regular sneakers trudging through nearly a foot of snow. "He must be freezing," Zoe whispered, but there was uncertainty in her voice. That was the thing that started to really disturb me. Despite being drastically underdressed for a blizzard, the man showed no signs of being cold. No hunched shoulders, no hands stuffed in pockets, no hurried pace to get out of the elements. He just walked, steadily and deliberately through the snow, his path cutting a direct line toward our car. When he was about 15 yards away, he raised his hand in a wave. The motion was all wrong, too slow, too mechanical, like someone who had only ever read about waving but never actually done it. "I don't like this," I muttered, my hand hovering over the ignition key. "Wait," Zoe said, though I could hear fear creeping into her voice. "He might need help." The man was close enough now that I could see his face. Pale, almost gray-tinged skin, dark hair plastered to his forehead, not by snow, but what looked like sweat. And his eyes. They were fixed on us with an intensity that made my stomach turn. His lips were stretched into a smile that was far too wide, revealing too many teeth. He approached my driver's side window and raised his hand to tap on the glass. That's when I noticed his fingernails, long, yellow, and curved. His knuckles were scraped raw, with dark stains that might have been dirt or dried blood. When his face pressed against my window, I could see that his eyes were bloodshot to the point where the whites were more red than white. And despite standing in a blizzard, his skin wasn't flushed with cold. It remained that sickly grayish white. He tapped 3 times, deliberately, then spoke. I couldn't hear him through the glass and the howling wind, but I could read his lips clearly enough. "Let me in." That's when I noticed something else, something that still makes me sick to think about. Despite the raging snowstorm, despite the wind that was strong enough to rock our car, his coat wasn't moving anymore. It hung perfectly still, as if he were standing in a completely windless space. The snow wasn't landing on him either. It seemed to curve around him, like water flowing around a rock in a stream. Zoe saw it too. "Start the car," she whispered urgently. "Start the fucking car now." I didn't need to be told twice. I cranked the ignition, threw the Subaru into reverse, and hit the gas harder than I should have on the snow-covered pavement. The tires spun for a heart-stopping moment before catching, and we lurched backward. The man didn't jump out of the way or look surprised. He just turned his head, that horrible smile still fixed on his face, and watched us. As I shifted into drive and started to pull away, he began walking toward us again with that same measured pace. I floored it, the car fishtailing as we shot toward the exit. In my rearview mirror, I could see him still following, still smiling. He wasn't running, just walking. But somehow, He didn't seem to be getting any smaller in my mirror. "He's keeping up," Zoe said, her voice shaking as she looked back. "How the fuck is he keeping up with us?" I pushed the Subaru to its limits on the snowy road, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The GPS showed a small town called Lakeview about 10 miles ahead. We drove in terrified silence, both of us checking the mirrors every few seconds. The blizzard seemed to ease the further we got from Hollow Creek, which made no meteorological sense, but was a blessing nonetheless. By the time we reached Lakeview, the snow had lightened to gentle flurries, and the sky had brightened slightly. We pulled into the first gas station we saw, both of us physically shaking. I needed to pee desperately, but was too afraid to get out of the car alone. "Come with me to the bathroom?" I asked Zoe, hating how childish I sounded. "I wasn't planning to let you out of my sight," she replied, her attempt at a smile more of a grimace. Inside the gas station, an older man with a gray beard was behind the counter. He looked up when we entered, taking in our pale faces and trembling hands. "You two look like you've seen a ghost," he said, and something in his tone made my skin crawl all over again. "We got caught in the storm," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Had to stop at Hollow Creek rest area for a bit." The clerk's expression changed instantly. The friendly smile vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. "Hollow Creek, huh?" He set down the newspaper he'd been reading. "Don't get many folks stopping there, especially not in winter." "There was a man there," Zoe said suddenly. "Walking around in the snow without proper clothes, he tried to get into our car." The clerk's face drained of color. He came out from behind the counter and went to the front door, flipping the sign from open to closed and turning the deadbolt. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to a small table in the corner where truckers probably had their coffee. "You two need something hot to drink." He disappeared into a back room and returned with 3 steaming mugs of coffee. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold mine without spilling. "That rest area has a history," he finally said after taking a long sip. "About 8 years ago, a young man went hiking in those woods. It was early spring, but we got a late blizzard. Came out of nowhere just like today's. Search and rescue looked for 2 weeks but never found him. I felt my blood run cold. And people think he's still out there, his ghost or something?" The clerk shrugged. "Some say that. Others say something else was already out there, and it just wears his appearance now, like a coat." Zoe made a small, strangled sound. "The thing is," the clerk continued, lowering his voice, "folks who've seen him say he's looking for someone to take his place, someone to stay at Hollow Creek so he can finally leave." I remembered the words I'd seen on his lips. "Let me in," not "help me" or "can I use your phone?" "Let me in." "Has anyone ever—" I couldn't finish the question. The clerk nodded slowly. "2 tourists about 4 years back stopped at Hollow Creek during a storm, just like you. Their car was found in the parking lot, engine still running, doors wide open. They were never found." We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, the clerk stood up. "You two should get going before it gets dark. Lakeview Inn down the street has decent rooms. I'd suggest staying the night and heading out in the morning." We thanked him and hurried back to our car. As we pulled away from the gas station, I glanced back and saw the clerk watching us through the window, his expression unreadable. We ended up staying 2 nights in Lakeview, waiting for a snowplow to clear Highway 68 south. Neither of us mentioned going back north past Hollow Creek. Our photography trip was effectively over. On our drive home, we passed within 5 miles of the rest area. The sky was clear blue that day, the road well plowed, but I drove at nearly 80 mph until we were well past it. Zoe kept her eyes closed for that entire stretch. We've tried to rationalize what happened. Maybe he was just a mentally ill homeless person. Maybe the clerk was messing with the scared out-of-towners. Maybe the whole thing was amplified by our fear and the disorienting effects of the blizzard. But I know what I saw. I know that the snow and wind didn't touch him. I know that he kept pace with a car going 30 miles an hour. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night and check my rearview mirror, I swear I can see that unnaturally wide smile in the back seat just for a split second. I've researched Hollow Creek online since then. There's almost nothing about it. It's not on most maps, and the few mentions I've found are just coordinates and confirmation that it's a seasonal rest area. Nothing about missing hikers or abandoned cars. Nothing about a man who wanders through blizzards, untouched by the cold, looking for someone to take his place. But the other night, I got a text from Zoe at 3 a.m. All it said was, "Do you ever feel like we didn't really leave that place?" I haven't replied. I don't know what to say. Because the truth is, ever since that day, I've had this persistent feeling that something followed us home. That somehow, a little piece of Hollow Creek came back with us. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I swear I can hear tapping on my bedroom window. 3 slow, deliberate taps, and a voice whispering, "Let me in." I've been debating whether to share this for weeks now. I'm still looking over my shoulder constantly and jumping at every noise outside my apartment. I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone here has dealt with something similar and can offer advice. About a month ago, I decided to take a solo weekend trip to the Adirondacks. I'd been working 60-hour weeks at my marketing job in Boston, and honestly, I was burning out. My boss kept dumping last-minute projects on me. My social life was practically non-existent, and my apartment had started to feel like a prison. I just needed to get away, breathe some fresh air, see some trees instead of concrete. I booked this cute little inn near Lake Placid, nothing fancy, just a small family-run place with good reviews. The drive up was exactly what I needed. Windows down, music blasting, no emails or Slack notifications. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. I arrived around 5 p.m. on Friday, checked in, and dropped my stuff in my room. It was basic but clean. Queen bed, outdated floral bedspread, small bathroom. The kind of place that hadn't been updated since the 90s, but was perfectly fine for a weekend. I wasn't planning to spend much time in the room anyway. After freshening up, I decided to grab dinner and maybe a drink at this local bar the inn owner recommended, the Timber Lodge. It was only a 10-minute walk, which was perfect since I wanted to have a couple drinks without worrying about driving. The bar was exactly what you'd expect in a mountain town, lots of wood, some taxidermy on the walls, locals who all seemed to know each other. I found a spot at the bar and ordered a burger and a local IPA. I was scrolling through my phone. I know I was supposed to be disconnecting, when I heard someone sit down on the stool next to me. "That beer any good?" I looked up to see a woman about my age, early 30s I'd guess. She had long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wore hiking boots with jeans and a flannel, and had this easy smile that made her seem immediately approachable. "Pretty good," I said, showing her the label. "Local brewery." She ordered the same and introduced herself as Kara. She told me she was also up from the city for the weekend, though she was from New York, not Boston. "Let me guess," she said, taking a sip of her beer. "Escaping the corporate hellscape for a few days?" I laughed and admitted she was spot on. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. It was so easy, the way conversations with strangers sometimes can be, when you know you'll never see them again. We swapped work horror stories. She was in publishing, complained about dating apps, debated the best hiking trails in the area. Nothing deep or personal, just casual conversation that felt comfortable. When I mentioned I was planning to drive up to Whiteface Mountain in the morning, she said she might do the same. I didn't think much of it. It's a popular spot after all. We paid our tabs separately, wished each other a good weekend, and that was that. Or so I thought. The next morning, I got up early, grabbed coffee and a muffin at a local cafe, and hit the road around 8 a.m. The inn owner had mapped out a scenic route for me that would take me past some great lookout points before reaching Whiteface. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes, enjoying the winding mountain roads and the fall colors, when I noticed a blue Subaru in my rear-view mirror. Something about it caught my attention, but I couldn't place why. I didn't think much of it until I made a turn onto a less traveled road, and the same car followed. That's when it clicked. It was the same car I'd seen Kara get into last night after we left the bar. I'd walked past it on my way back to the inn. Guess she really is heading to Whiteface too, I thought. The road I was on wasn't the main route there, but it wasn't exactly off the beaten path either. Still, it did seem like an odd coincidence. For the next few miles, the blue Subaru maintained the same distance behind me. Not tailgating, just there. Always there. I took another turn, and so did she. I increased my speed a little, and she matched it. A weird feeling started creeping up my spine. I tried to rationalize it. We'd talked about going to the same place, so maybe she was just following me because she thought I knew a good route. Maybe she wasn't great with directions. Maybe it was just coincidence. I decided to test it. There was a small roadside rest area coming up, just a pull-off with a couple of picnic tables and a view of the valley. I signaled and pulled in, not because I needed to stop, but to see what she would do. The blue Subaru immediately pulled in behind me. My heart started beating faster. I stayed in my car for a minute, watching in the rear view as Kara got out of her car. She was smiling and walking toward me. I took a deep breath and got out too, trying to look normal. "Hey," she called, that same easy smile from last night. "I thought that was you. What a coincidence, right?" But it wasn't a coincidence. She'd been following me for at least 15 miles. "Yeah, weird," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just stopped to check out the view." "It's gorgeous," she agreed, coming to stand next to me. Too close. I could smell her perfume, something woodsy and strong. "So you're heading to Whiteface too?" I nodded, taking a slight step away. "We should stick together," she suggested, her eyes not leaving my face. "These mountain roads can be dangerous if you don't know them. Plus, it's always safer to hike with someone, right?" There was something in her tone that set off alarm bells. It was too eager, too familiar for someone I'd chatted with for a couple hours at a bar. "Thanks, but I'm actually meeting someone there," I lied. "An old friend from college who lives in the area now." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, you didn't mention that last night, didn't I?" "Must have slipped my mind," I said, already moving back toward my car. "Anyway, I should get going. Don't want to keep them waiting." "Sure," she said, but she didn't move toward her own car. She just stood there watching me. "Maybe I'll see you up there." "Maybe," I echoed, getting into my car and locking the doors immediately. I pulled back onto the road, heart pounding. In my rearview mirror, I could see her still standing there, watching me drive away. She didn't immediately follow, which gave me a moment of relief. I decided to abandon my plans for Whiteface. Something felt off, and I didn't want to risk running into her again. Instead, I took a different route, exploring some smaller roads and eventually stopping at a different hiking trail than I'd planned. I kept checking my mirrors the whole time, but didn't see the blue Subaru again. By late afternoon, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. She was probably just being friendly in an awkward way. Maybe she was lonely and looking for a hiking buddy. I felt a little silly for changing my plans and being so paranoid. I stopped at a local brewery on my way back to the inn, had a late lunch, and tried to relax again. I was on vacation after all. No point in letting one weird interaction ruin my weekend. I got back to the inn around 5 p.m., planning to read on the porch for a while before dinner. As I pulled into the small parking lot, my stomach dropped. The blue Subaru was there, parked right next to my spot. I sat in my car for a long moment, trying to process this. It couldn't be coincidence. The inn only had 8 rooms. What were the odds she'd be staying at the exact same place? I hadn't mentioned where I was staying during our conversation. I was sure of it. Maybe she'd followed me last night too, after the bar. The thought made me feel sick. I considered driving away, finding somewhere else to stay. But it was peak fall season, and everything in the area had been booked solid. Plus, I'd already paid for the room. I took a deep breath and got out of my car, grabbing my backpack and locking the doors. I scanned the property but didn't see Kara anywhere. Maybe she was in her room. Maybe I could just avoid her until checkout tomorrow. I hurried to my room, unlocked the door, and locked it again behind me immediately. For the first time, I noticed there was no security chain, just the basic doorknob lock that probably hadn't been updated in decades. I texted my roommate back in Boston, giving her a quick rundown of the situation and sending her the inn's address and Kara's description, just in case. She responded with a mix of concern and reassurance. It was weird for sure, but maybe there was an innocent explanation. I decided to order pizza delivery to my room instead of going out for dinner. I didn't want to risk running into Kara again. The guy at the front desk seemed a little surprised when I called to ask if they could direct the delivery person to my room, but he agreed. While waiting for the pizza, I dragged the room's only chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. It wasn't much, but it made me feel slightly better. I barely slept that night. Every creak in the old building, every car that drove by on the main road had me sitting upright in bed. I kept the bathroom light on and the curtains tightly closed. Around 3 a.m., I swear I heard footsteps pause outside my door, but when I held my breath and listened, there was nothing. When morning finally came, I was exhausted but relieved. I'd made it through the night. I packed quickly, planning to check out as early as possible and get the hell back to Boston. I removed the chair, unlocked my door, and opened it, only to find Kara standing right there, hand raised as if about to knock. I nearly screamed. "Oh," she said, looking surprised. "I was just coming to see if you wanted to grab breakfast." She was wearing the same flannel as yesterday, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked perfectly normal, friendly even, but her eyes, they didn't match her smile. They were watchful, calculating. "Sorry, I'm actually checking out early," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Family emergency. Need to get back to Boston." "That's too bad," she said, not moving from my doorway. "I thought maybe we could spend the day together. I really enjoyed talking with you the other night." She tilted her head slightly. "Why were you avoiding me yesterday? I thought we had a connection." The way she said connection sent chills down my spine. Like we'd shared something profound instead of just a casual conversation at a bar. "I wasn't avoiding you," I lied. "I just changed my plans. And like I said, I need to go now. Excuse me." I tried to step around her, my suitcase in hand, but she moved to block me. "You're lying," she said, her voice suddenly hard. The friendly expression was gone. "I waited for you at Whiteface for hours. You never showed up." "I told you I was meeting someone else," I said, my heart racing. "Please move." "No, you weren't," she said. "You lied to me. Why would you do that? I thought we were friends." "We're not friends," I said, fear making me blunt. "We talked for 2 hours at a bar. That's it. Now please let me through." Her face changed then. The mask of friendliness completely dropped, replaced by something cold and angry. "You're just like all the rest," she spat. "Stuck up, bitch. I was trying to be nice to you." She was blocking my only exit, her body rigid with anger. I was genuinely scared now, not sure what she might do. But then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the anger seemed to drain away. "Fine," she said, stepping aside. "Go back to your perfect little life." I didn't wait for her to change her mind. I hurried past her, not looking back, and practically ran to the front desk to check out. The older woman working there must have seen something in my face. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked as she processed my credit card. "Yes, fine. Just need to get on the road," I said, glancing nervously toward the hallway where my room was. Had Kara followed me? "Drive safe then," the woman said, handing me my receipt. I half jogged to my car, threw my suitcase in the back seat, and locked the doors immediately. As I started the engine, I saw Kara emerge from the inn. She stood on the porch, watching me. Not approaching, just watching. I backed out of the parking space and drove away as quickly as I could without drawing attention. The entire 3-hour drive back to Boston, I kept checking my mirrors, convinced I'd see that blue Subaru behind me. But there was nothing. By the time I reached my apartment building, I'd started to calm down a little. Maybe it was over. Maybe she'd just been some socially awkward woman who'd misinterpreted our conversation as the start of a friendship. I grabbed my suitcase from the back seat and headed into my building, relieved to be home. I checked my mailbox in the lobby, then went up to my third-floor apartment. As I approached my door, I noticed something on the floor in front of it, a small white envelope. I froze, key in hand, staring at it. It hadn't been there when I left on Friday. My roommate was away visiting her parents for the week, so no one would have been in or out of our apartment. With shaking hands, I picked it up. No name, no address, no stamp, just a plain white envelope. I unlocked my door, went inside, and locked it behind me before opening the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "You'll regret this. We could have been so good together. I know where you live now." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I called the police immediately. They took a report but didn't seem particularly concerned. What crime had been committed? A note? Not technically a threat. They suggested I could file for a restraining order, but I'd need Kara's full name and address, information I didn't have. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't seen Kara or her blue Subaru, but I'm terrified every time I leave my apartment. I've changed my routines, asked neighbors to keep an eye out, added extra locks to our door. My roommate thinks I'm overreacting, but she didn't see the look in Kara's eyes when I rejected her friendship. The worst part is not knowing. Is she watching me? Is she waiting for something? Or did she just want to scare me and now she's moved on? I keep wondering how she found out where I live. Did she follow me all the way from the Adirondacks to Boston? Did she somehow get my information from the inn? I haven't used any social media since it happened, afraid she might be monitoring my accounts. I'm not taking any more solo trips. Not for a long time. Maybe never. The thought of being alone in an unfamiliar place now fills me with dread. I jump every time the phone rings or there's a knock at the door. I've started having nightmares where I'm driving on those mountain roads with someone following me, always just out of sight in my mirrors. But I know they're there. I can feel them watching. I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's anything I can do except wait and hope she loses interest. But every day I check under my door for another envelope, and every night I lie awake listening for footsteps in the hallway. I know this all started because I was just trying to be polite at a bar. I wasn't flirting, I wasn't leading her on, I was just being friendly. How was I supposed to know that a simple conversation would turn into this nightmare? Has anyone else experienced something like this? Did it ever stop? Or do I just have to live with this fear now? I've been replaying it in my head for weeks now. Every detail, every moment. I can't sleep without checking the locks 3, sometimes 4 times. Bear sleeps in my room now. I can't bear to be alone anymore. Sorry for the rambling, but I need to get this off my chest. And my therapist thinks writing it down might help. I doubt it will. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. Just me and Bear, my 3-year-old German shepherd, heading up to my uncle's cabin in northern Michigan for some peace and quiet. I'd been working overtime for months, barely sleeping, and my boss finally told me to take a long weekend before I burned out completely. The cabin sits on a small lake about 4 hours north of where I live, isolated enough for privacy but not so remote that it feels dangerous. At least, that's what I thought. I left early Friday morning, around 5 a.m., hoping to beat traffic and make it to the cabin with plenty of daylight left. Bear was excited. He always knows when we're going somewhere fun, and the cabin is his favorite place. All that space to run, trails to explore, and no neighbors to complain about his barking. I packed light, just some clothes, food, my laptop, even though there's spotty internet at best, and Bear's stuff. The weather report mentioned a chance of snow, but nothing major. This was late February, and snowstorms aren't unusual in Michigan that time of year. I've driven through plenty of them. I wasn't worried. The first couple hours of the drive were uneventful. Bear dozed in the passenger seat while I listened to a true crime podcast. Ironic, considering what happened later. Around 8 a.m., I noticed dark clouds rolling in faster than expected, and by 9, the snow had started. It was light at first, but within half an hour, it was coming down hard enough that I had to slow to about 40 mph. By 10 a.m., I was on a 2-lane highway, cutting through dense forest, the kind where the trees grow right up to the shoulder, creating this tunnel effect. The snow was really coming down now, those big, heavy flakes that pile up quickly. My windshield wipers were struggling to keep up, and there were hardly any other cars on the road. Just me, Bear, and miles of white. I remember checking my GPS and seeing I still had about an hour and a half to go. The cabin is off the beaten path. You have to take a series of increasingly small roads to get there. I remember thinking maybe I should stop somewhere and wait out the worst of the storm, but there aren't many places to stop on that stretch. That's when I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder of the road, thumb out, no car in sight. Just a lanky figure in a dark jacket, snow piling up on his shoulders. I almost didn't see him through the curtain of white. Now, I need to be clear about something. I'm not the type to pick up hitchhikers. I'm a woman traveling alone, well, with my dog, but still, and I've watched enough true crime to know better. But something about seeing this person standing in a worsening blizzard miles from anywhere hit me hard. As I got closer, I could make out more details. A young man, probably mid-20s, with a dark beanie pulled low over his ears. He didn't have proper winter gear, just that jacket which looked too thin for the weather. No gloves, no scarf. His face was pale, almost unnaturally so, and his cheekbones were sharp enough that they cast shadows. I slowed down as I approached him, and that's when Bear woke up. He immediately leaned forward, ears perked, and let out this low growl I'd never heard from him before. Bear is protective, but he's never aggressive without reason. That should have been my first warning, but I kept thinking about how cold it was. The temperature readout on my dash said 18 degrees, and how there was nothing for miles. What if that was me standing there? What if my car broke down and no one stopped? So I pulled over. The man jogged up to my passenger window and I rolled it down just enough to hear him. Bear was still growling, hackles raised. "Thanks for stopping," the man said, and his voice was odd. Pleasant, but almost too smooth, like he was reading from a script. "I need to get up the road a ways. My car broke down back there and my phone's dead." I hesitated, then nodded to the back door. "You can sit in the back. My dog's not too happy about strangers." He smiled, and I swear his teeth looked too white, too perfect. "No problem, thanks again." When he opened the back door, Bear went nuts, barking, snarling, trying to climb over the seat. I had to grab his collar to hold him back. "Bear, stop it! It's okay!" I turned to the hitchhiker. "Sorry, he's not usually like this." "Dogs are good judges of character," the man said as he slid into the back seat. "But don't worry, we'll be friends soon, won't we, Bear?" The way he said Bear's name made my skin crawl, like he already knew it. But I figured he'd just heard me say it. As we pulled back onto the road, I realized I hadn't asked where he was going, but before I could, he spoke again. "Heading to a cabin, right?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, startled. "How did you know that?" He shrugged. "Just a guess. Most people out this way are either heading to a cabin or going fishing. Too cold for fishing today." It made sense, but still set me on edge. There was a faint smell in the car now, too. Something metallic, like pennies or blood. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual while keeping my eyes on the increasingly treacherous road. "Just up ahead," he said vaguely. "You'll want to pull over soon." "Excuse me?" "I mean, there's a gas station coming up in a few miles. You might want to stop there. Storm's getting worse." He was right about that. The snow was falling so heavily now that I could barely see 20 feet ahead, even with my high beams on. Bear had settled down somewhat, but kept looking back at our passenger and whining. We drove in silence for about 15 minutes. I kept sneaking glances in the rearview mirror, and each time the hitchhiker was staring straight ahead, unblinking, with this faint smile. He never seemed to shiver despite coming in from the cold, and the snow that had been on his shoulders when he got in hadn't melted. It was just gone. The silence was becoming unbearable, so I tried small talk. "So what brings you out here in this weather?" He didn't answer for so long that I thought maybe he hadn't heard me. Then, just as I was about to repeat myself, he said, "I'm always out here." Before I could process what the hell that meant, he pointed ahead. "There's the gas station. You should stop." Through the curtain of snow, I could make out lights, a small gas station set back from the road. I hadn't noticed it on my GPS, but reception was spotty, and I was due for a break anyway. Plus, I figured a public place would be safer than continuing alone with this increasingly weird stranger. I pulled in and parked near the front door. The place looked old, with just 2 pumps and a small convenience store. The sign was so snow-covered I couldn't read it. "Thanks for the ride," the hitchhiker said, reaching for the door handle. You should go inside and get something warm to drink. They have great coffee. You're getting out here? I asked, surprised. There was literally nothing else around. He smiled again, and this time I noticed how his eyes didn't crinkle at the corners like they should. This is my stop. Thanks again for picking me up. Not everyone would have. As he opened the door, a blast of cold air filled the car. He turned back one last time. You're kind. Remember that. You'll see. Then he was gone, trudging through the snow toward the back of the gas station. Bear immediately went crazy, barking, pawing at the window, then scrambling to the back seat where the hitchhiker had been sitting. I tried to calm him down, but he was frantic in a way I'd never seen before. Bear, it's okay. He's gone now. But Bear wouldn't settle. He kept barking at the door, then at the space where the hitchhiker had been sitting. I decided to let him out briefly to do his business while I went inside for coffee. When I opened my door, that's when I saw them. Footprints. Dozens of them circling my car, like someone had walked around and around it while we were inside. But that was impossible. We'd just pulled in, and I hadn't seen anyone else. Bear noticed them too, and started following them, nose to the ground, growling. The prints led away from the car, around the building, and then nowhere. They just stopped at the back corner of the gas station, as if whoever made them had vanished. I called Bear back, suddenly anxious to get back in the car and leave. As I waited for him to return, I pulled out my phone to check how much farther to the cabin. That's when I saw it. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. You shouldn't have stopped. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I looked around wildly, but there was no one in sight, just the empty gas station and the endless curtain of snow. Bear came running back, still agitated, and I hurriedly opened the car door for him. As we both got in, the lights of the gas station flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, leaving us in a bubble of darkness broken only by my headlights. I didn't think. I just slammed the car into drive and peeled out of there, tires spinning in the snow before finally catching. The highway stretched ahead, a white tunnel in my headlights, and I drove as fast as I dared in the conditions, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. About 5 miles down the road, I managed to get cell service again and called 911. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, but I was nearly hysterical by that point. She said they'd send a patrol car to meet me at the next town, about 20 minutes ahead. When I finally reached the town and met with the police officer, a middle-aged guy named Officer Reeves, I told him everything. He listened patiently, then asked me to show him the text message. It was gone, just gone from my phone, as if it had never existed. "Ma'am," Officer Reeves said gently, "can you tell me exactly where this gas station was?" I described the location as best I could, mentioning it was about 25 miles back, just after a sharp curve in the highway. His face changed then, becoming very still. "There's no gas station there, ma'am. Hasn't been for at least 15 years. Old place called Max burned down back in '08. Nothing's been built there since." I refused to believe him at first. I knew what I'd seen. But when he pulled up Google Maps on his computer and showed me the stretch of highway, there was nothing there, just trees. "Look," he said not unkindly, "the storm's really bad out there. Visibility's poor. Maybe you saw something else, or maybe—" He didn't finish, but I knew what he was thinking. Maybe I'd imagined it all, but I couldn't have imagined the hitchhiker, or the footprints, or the text message. Officer Reeves offered to escort me back to town, where I could get a hotel room for the night, but something in me just wanted to get to the cabin, to get somewhere familiar and safe. He advised against it, but eventually relented when I insisted. giving me his card and telling me to call if anything else happened. I made it to the cabin just before dark, Bear glued to my side the entire time. The drive was nerve-wracking. Every shadow in the trees looked like a figure standing just out of sight, and I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the hitchhiker's pale face. Once inside, I locked every door and window, drew all the curtains, and turned on every light. Bear refused to leave my side, even to eat. He kept staring at the windows, growling softly at nothing I could see. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak and groan of the old cabin. Around 3 a.m. I thought I heard footsteps on the porch, that distinctive crunch of snow under boots, but when I gathered the courage to peek through the curtains, there was nothing there, just fresh snow, unmarked by footprints, except for one spot right below the window, where the snow was melted in a perfect circle, as if something hot had been placed there. I left first thing in the morning, abandoning my plans for a relaxing weekend. The drive home was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched the entire way. When I got home, I researched the stretch of highway where I'd picked up the hitchhiker. There were no reports of accidents there, no missing persons, nothing that might explain who he was or what I experienced. But I did find one thing. An old news article about the gas station, Max. It had indeed burned down in 2008, with the owner inside. According to the article, there were rumors that Mac had been luring travelers to the remote gas station for years, robbing them, sometimes worse. The fire was ruled suspicious. It's been 3 weeks now, and I still haven't found any rational explanation for what happened. Sometimes I almost convince myself it was just stress and the bad weather playing tricks on my mind. But then I remember the hitchhiker's parting words, "You're kind, remember that, you'll see." Last night, I got another text from that same unknown number, the one that disappeared from my phone before. All it said was, "Soon." I don't know what's coming, but I know it's not over. Whatever, whoever that was, they're not done with me. And the worst part? I still don't know if they meant to harm me that day or if they were warning me about something else. All I know is that Bear won't stop staring at the windows at night, and sometimes when it snows, I swear I can hear footsteps circling my house, over and over, never coming closer, but never going away. I still can't sleep through the night without checking my closets and under my bed. It's been 3 months since I house sat for the Carsons, and I'm writing this from my new apartment on the 14th floor of a building with a doorman and security cameras. I need to get this off my chest because the nightmares won't stop. The Carsons were family friends, this sweet older couple who'd known my parents since before I was born. They're the kind of people who bring casseroles when someone's sick and remember your birthday every year. When they asked if I could house sit while they took their dream trip to Europe for a month, I jumped at the chance. Their house is this beautiful 2-story Victorian at the edge of town, right where the suburbs meet the woods. Way nicer than my cramped university apartment, and I figured it would be the perfect quiet place to work on my thesis. "It'll be the easiest job ever, Emma," Mr. Carson told me, handing over the keys. "Just feed Olive twice a day and don't burn the place down." He laughed at his own joke while Mrs. Carson showed me around. It was a gorgeous house, hardwood floors, antique furniture, family photos everywhere. The only room they didn't show me was the basement. Mr. Carson just pointed to a door off the kitchen and said, "That's the basement, but there's nothing down there except old junk. No need to go poking around." He'd locked it before they left, which I thought was weird but didn't question. Rich people can be particular about their stuff. The first week was actually perfect. I was making good progress on my thesis. Olive, their tabby cat, was keeping me company, and I was enjoying having a full kitchen and a bathtub. I'd walk around in my pajamas all day, make tea whenever I wanted, and work at this beautiful oak desk in their study. It felt like a mini vacation. Then Saturday night happened. I was up late reading when I heard it, this faint tapping sound. At first I thought it might be a branch hitting a window, but it was too rhythmic. Tap, 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 tap. It seemed to be coming from inside the walls or maybe from below. I turned off my music and just listened. It would stop for a few minutes, then start again. I eventually convinced myself it was just the pipes or the house settling and went to bed. The next morning something felt off the moment I woke up. I can't explain it. Just that feeling when something's not quite right. I went downstairs to make coffee and noticed the basement door was slightly open. Not wide open, just cracked about an inch. I stood there staring at it, coffee mug frozen halfway to my mouth. I knew it had been locked. I hadn't even tried to open it all week. I pushed it closed and checked. It was still locked from the outside with a deadbolt that needed a key, which made no sense. How could it be locked and open at the same time? I tried to shake it off. Maybe the lock was faulty. Maybe I was just tired and hadn't noticed it before. I went about my day working on my thesis and trying not to think about it. But then I started noticing other things, little things. A dining room chair pulled slightly away from the table when I was sure I hadn't sat there. A lamp I thought I'd turned off was on when I came back into the room. An unfamiliar glass in the kitchen sink that I didn't remember using. Nothing major, nothing I couldn't explain away, but it was adding up. That evening I was watching Netflix when the tapping started again. This time it was louder, more insistent, and definitely coming from beneath me. Tap, 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 tap. Then a pause, then again. Tap, 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 tap. I muted the TV and just listened. It wasn't random. It had a pattern. That's when I realized it almost sounded like Morse code, though I don't know Morse code, so I couldn't tell what it might be saying. I called my boyfriend and put him on speaker while I walked around checking the doors and windows. Everything was locked. He told me it was probably just an animal that had gotten into the crawl space or walls. Mice or a raccoon, maybe. He asked. God, I wish I'd said yes. But his apartment was almost an hour away, and I felt stupid being so scared over nothing. No, I'm fine, I told him. I'm just being paranoid. After we hung up, I tried to go back to my show, but I couldn't focus. The tapping had stopped, but now I was hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the house. I turned up the volume on the TV to drown it out. Around midnight, I decided to just go to bed. I'd barely made it to the top of the stairs when the tapping started again, louder than before, and this time it definitely wasn't mice. It sounded like someone deliberately knocking on a pipe or the floor. Tap, 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 tap. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was coming from directly beneath the staircase, from the basement. I don't know where I found the courage, but something in me snapped. I was sick of being scared in a house where I was supposed to feel safe. I marched back down the stairs, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and went to the basement door. It was cracked open again, even though I'd closed it earlier. I pushed it all the way open and stared down into the darkness. The tapping had stopped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Is someone down there?" Silence. I flicked on the basement light. A bare bulb illuminated steep wooden stairs leading down into a cluttered space. I could see boxes, old furniture, the usual basement stuff. Part of me was screaming to just close the door and call the police, but another part needed to know what was going on. I started down the stairs, the wood creaking under my feet. The basement was bigger than I expected, with exposed brick walls and a concrete floor. It was filled with the typical storage stuff: Christmas decorations, old suitcases, boxes labeled winter clothes, and photo albums. But as I moved deeper into the space, something caught my eye. Against the far wall was a large wardrobe that seemed oddly placed, like it had been deliberately positioned there rather than just stored. It was an old-fashioned thing made of dark wood with ornate carvings. I approached it slowly, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand. When I reached for the handle, I noticed scratch marks on the inside of the door, like someone had tried to get out. My stomach dropped. I pulled the doors open and stumbled backward, nearly falling. Inside the wardrobe was a small cot with rumpled bedding. There was a plastic water bottle, some granola bar wrappers, and old newspapers spread out like someone had been reading them. The newspapers were from the past week, while I had been in the house. Someone had been living in the basement. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. That's when I kicked something behind me, a small wooden box that had been hidden beneath a tarp. It skidded across the floor, its contents spilling out. I shined my flashlight on what looked like a collection of small bones, animal bones, meticulously arranged and sorted by size. There were tiny skulls that might have been from birds or mice, larger ones from what could have been rabbits or squirrels, and among them a human-sized shoe. I ran. I didn't even remember climbing the stairs. Suddenly I was in the kitchen, fumbling with my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my house, I gasped. I mean, not my house, I'm house-sitting, but someone's been living in the basement. Please send someone quick. The dispatcher kept me on the line while officers were dispatched. She told me to go outside and wait for them, which I did. I stood on the front lawn, hugging myself, staring at the house, half expecting someone to come bursting out. The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers with flashlights and hands on their holsters. They took my statement, then went inside to search the house. I stayed outside, unable to stop shaking. They were in there for what felt like forever. Finally, one of them came out and approached me. The house is clear, ma'am. There's no one inside now. But the wardrobe, I insisted. The cot, the bones. We found those, he confirmed, his expression grim. We also found this. He showed me a photo on his phone of a small notebook, a journal. They'd found it hidden under the mattress in the wardrobe. There are entries going back months, he explained. Whoever this was, they've been watching the house for a while, noting the Carsons' routines. The last entry was from yesterday. It just says, she's here alone now, waiting for the right moment. I felt sick. While I'd been working on my thesis, taking baths, sleeping, someone had been watching me, waiting. The police did a thorough search of the surrounding area, but found no one. They dusted for prints and took the journal and bone collection as evidence. They offered to have an officer stay with me, but I couldn't bear to be in that house another minute. I called a friend who lived nearby and stayed with her instead. I called the Carsons the next morning to tell them what happened. They were horrified and cut their trip short to come home. When they arrived, Mr. Carson was white as a sheet. He kept saying he had no idea, that they never used the basement except for storage, that the door was always locked. The police investigation revealed that someone had been accessing the basement through a small window that had been modified to open from the outside. The lock had been carefully removed and replaced with one that looked intact but could be opened easily. They'd been coming and going for months, possibly longer. The Carsons sold the house a few months later. They couldn't bear to live there knowing someone had been hiding in their home, watching them. I don't blame them. As for me, I moved as soon as my lease was up. I now live in a high-rise with security cameras in the hallways and a doorman who checks everyone who enters. I still have nightmares about that basement, about the shoes that matched the bones, about what might have happened if I hadn't discovered the wardrobe when I did. The police never found the person. They never identified whose bones were in that collection. They never figured out who had been living in the Carsons' basement, watching and waiting. Every time my apartment makes a strange noise, every time I hear an unexpected tap, I wonder if they found me again. I wonder if they're still waiting for the right moment. I still get chills thinking about what happened that night at the Harper house. I've never written this down before, but I need to get it off my chest because it's been eating at me for months. I'm a college student, working part-time jobs to help pay for my classes. I don't usually babysit anymore, did plenty of that in high school. But when Mrs. Harper called me in a panic last Friday saying their regular sitter had canceled last minute, I couldn't say no. We'd met a few times at neighborhood functions. My parents live a few blocks from them, and she offered to pay double the normal rate. I had plans to stay in and binge watch a new series. Nothing special, so the extra cash was tempting. The Harpers live in Oakwood Heights, one of those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods where every lawn looks professionally maintained. Their house is gorgeous, one of those places you'd see in a home magazine with the perfect furniture and decor that makes you wonder if real people actually live there. When I arrived at 6:30, Mrs. Harper was running around in a cocktail dress, frantically looking for her other earring. She explained that her husband was already at the dinner meeting with some important clients, and she was running late. She quickly introduced me to her kids, Mia, who's 6, and Ben, who's 8. They were both super polite, sitting quietly in the living room watching some cartoon. Bedtime is 8:30 for both of them, Mrs. Harper said, finally finding her earring under a couch cushion. They've already had dinner. Ben needs to finish his math worksheet before bed, and Mia might ask for another bedtime story, but don't let her trick you into more than one. She rattled off emergency numbers, where they'd be, and assured me they'd be back by 11. The first couple hours were honestly uneventful. The kids were well behaved, nothing like some of the monsters I've babysat before. Ben finished his homework without complaining, and we played a board game together. Mia showed me her collection of stuffed animals, all meticulously arranged on her bed, each with its own name and backstory. I made them a snack of apple slices with peanut butter, and by 8:15 they were both brushing their teeth. Bedtime went smoothly. I read Mia her story, some book about a princess who saves herself, and tucked her in. Ben was already in bed with a book when I checked on him, and he just asked me to turn his nightlight on before I closed his door. By 8:30, both kids were asleep, and I was alone in this big, quiet house. I settled on the couch in the living room with my laptop, close enough to hear the kids if they called out. The Harpers had told me to help myself to anything in the kitchen, so I made myself a cup of tea and grabbed some cookies they had in a jar on the counter. It was around 9:45 when the doorbell rang. The sound nearly made me jump out of my skin. It was weird. Who visits someone that late without calling first? My first thought was that maybe Mr. or Mrs. Harper had forgotten their keys, but they would have texted me. I approached the door cautiously. The Harpers had one of those peepholes, so I looked through it first. Standing on the porch was a woman in her 40s with shoulder-length brown hair. She was wearing a dark blue cardigan and jeans, looking completely normal, which somehow made it even more unsettling. After a second, I recognized her, Lana. She was one of Mrs. Harper's friends. I'd met her briefly at a neighborhood barbecue a few months ago. I remember because she had commented on my earrings and asked where I got them. I cracked the door open slightly, keeping the chain lock on. "Hi, Lana, right?" She smiled warmly. "Yes. Oh good, you remember me. I'm sorry to disturb you so late. Catherine asked me to stop by and check on things. She forgot to mention it to you, I guess." I hesitated. Mrs. Harper hadn't said anything about someone coming over, but maybe in her rush, she'd forgotten to tell me. "She didn't mention it," I said cautiously. Lana laughed lightly. "That's Catherine for you, always in a rush. She texted me after they got to the restaurant, asked if I could swing by. I live just down the street." She glanced past me into the house. "Are the kids asleep?" "Yeah, they went down about an hour ago." "Good. They can be a handful." She smiled again. "Do you mind if I come in for a minute? I'm parched, and Catherine would kill me if I didn't actually check that everything was okay." I still felt uneasy, but it seemed rude to leave Mrs. Harper's friend standing on the porch, and I did recognize her. I unhooked the chain and stepped back to let her in. "Thanks," Lana said, stepping inside. "Do you mind if I get some water?" "Not at all. The glasses are in the cabinet next to the sink." "I know," she said with a smile. "I've been here plenty of times." She walked toward the kitchen, and I followed, keeping a bit of distance between us. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was just the unexpectedness of having a visitor. In the kitchen, Lana moved with familiarity, grabbing a glass and filling it from the tap. She took a long drink, then set the glass down on the counter. "So, everything's been okay? No problems?" "None at all. The kids were great." "That's good to hear." She leaned against the counter. "You know, I was supposed to watch them tonight, but something came up last minute. I'm glad Catherine found someone reliable." That made my stomach drop. Mrs. Harper had told me their regular sitter canceled, not Lana. Why would she lie about that? "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought their regular sitter canceled." "I'm not their regular," Lana said quickly. "Just occasional, when the regular girl can't make it." She opened a drawer near her, the one with kitchen utensils. My heart started beating faster. Why was she opening drawers? "I should probably check on the kids," she said suddenly, "since I'm here." "They're sleeping," I replied firmly. "I don't want to disturb them. Just a peek, won't wake them." She started moving toward the hallway that led to the stairs. "I'd rather you didn't," I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. Mrs. Harper was very clear about not disturbing them once they were asleep. Lana turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. "Of course, you're right." She moved back to the kitchen island, picking up her water glass again. I noticed her hand was shaking slightly. "So, how long have you been babysitting for the Harpers?" she asked. "This is actually my first time," I replied, trying to sound casual while my mind was racing. Something was seriously wrong here. "Really? Catherine speaks so highly of you. I assumed you'd been watching them for ages." Another lie. Mrs. Harper couldn't have spoken highly of me as a babysitter when I'd never watched her kids before. "I should probably text Mrs. Harper," I said, reaching for my phone, "just to let her know you stopped by." "No need to bother her during dinner," Lana said quickly. "I'll let her know I checked in." I nodded, but still took out my phone. "I need to use the bathroom. I'll be right back." I walked to the half bathroom off the living room, closed the door, and immediately texted Mrs. Harper. "Your friend Lana is here. She said you asked her to check on things, just confirming that's okay." I waited, heart pounding. 3 dots appeared immediately, then Mrs. Harper's reply. "What? I didn't ask anyone to check in. Who is there?" My blood ran cold. I texted back quickly. "Woman named Lana, brown hair, blue cardigan, said she knows you." The reply came instantly. Get the kids and lock yourself in a room. Calling police now." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I flushed the toilet to maintain the pretense and washed my hands, trying to think. I needed to get to the kids upstairs, but Lana was between me and the staircase. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Lana wasn't in the kitchen anymore. Panic surged through me as I realized she must have gone upstairs. I moved as quietly and quickly as I could toward the stairs, straining my ears for any sound. The house was eerily silent. I took the stairs 2 at a time, trying not to make noise. At the top of the stairs, I heard a creak from Ben's room. My heart nearly stopped. I rushed down the hallway and pushed his door open. Ben was still asleep in his bed, his nightlight casting a soft blue glow across the room. I quickly scanned the room. No Lana. I crossed to Ben's bed and gently shook his shoulder. "Ben," I whispered. "Ben, wake up." He stirred, blinking up at me in confusion. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I lied, keeping my voice calm. "But we need to go to your sister's room right now, very quietly." To his credit, Ben didn't argue. He slipped out of bed and I took his hand, leading him across the hall to Mia's room. I opened her door slowly, praying she'd still be there. Relief washed over me when I saw her small form under the covers, her nightlight projecting stars across her ceiling. I crossed to her bed quickly, Ben still holding my hand. "Mia," I whispered, gently shaking her. "Mia, sweetie, wake up." She mumbled something and rolled over. I shook her again, more urgently this time. She finally opened her eyes. "We're going to play a game," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to be very quiet and go to your parents' bedroom, like a secret mission." Mia seemed more confused than scared, but she got out of bed. That's when I heard it, a floorboard creaking in the hallway outside the door. "Hide," I whispered urgently to the kids, pointing to Mia's closet. They moved quickly, sliding the door closed behind them. I grabbed a heavy ceramic lamp from Mia's nightstand, unplugging it and holding it like a weapon. I positioned myself between the closet and the bedroom door, heart hammering in my chest. The door, which I'd left slightly ajar, slowly began to open wider. And there stood Lana, her silhouette framed in the doorway. "I just wanted to check on them," she said softly. "They're so peaceful when they're asleep." I raised the lamp higher. "Mrs. Harper didn't send you. I just texted her. She's calling the police." Something shifted in Lana's expression. A flash of anger, quickly replaced by an eerie calmness. "You shouldn't have done that, Lily." The fact that she knew my name when I was certain I hadn't told her sent ice through my veins. "You need to leave," I said, amazed that my voice didn't shake. "Right now." "You are good at this," she said, ignoring my demand. "Watching over them, keeping them safe." She took a step into the room. "It's not an easy job." "Stop," I shouted, abandoning any pretense of calm. "The police are on their way. Get out." In the distance I heard sirens. Lana heard them too, her head tilted slightly. "They're beautiful children," she said, her voice almost wistful. "Perfect, really. Do you know how rare that is? Get out of this house." I was screaming now, the lamp raised threateningly. Lana took a step back, then another. "This isn't finished," she said quietly. Then she turned and moved quickly down the hallway toward the stairs. I heard her footsteps descending rapidly, then the sound of the front door opening and closing. I didn't dare move from my position until I heard the police sirens approaching the house. "Stay here," I told the kids, who were still hiding in the closet. "I'm going to get the police. Don't come out until I come back with them or your parents." I ran downstairs just as lights flashed through the windows. 2 police officers were already at the door. I flung it open before they could knock. "She just left," I gasped. "A woman, she just left." They took off in different directions, searching the yard and street while I stayed in the doorway, shaking uncontrollably. Mrs. Harper arrived less than 5 minutes later, rushing past me up the stairs to her children. Mr. Harper followed shortly after, and the police took statements from all of us. The woman was never found. The police searched the neighborhood but found no trace of her. They asked neighbors if anyone knew Alana matching the description I gave, but no one did. The Harpers were certain they didn't have a friend named Lana. I described meeting her at the neighborhood barbecue, but Mrs. Harper shook her head, insisting she didn't know anyone by that name who would have been at their party. The police checked the house for evidence of break-in or tampering, but found nothing. The only thing missing was a framed family photo from the mantel, something I hadn't noticed until Mrs. Harper pointed it out. That night has haunted me ever since. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't texted Mrs. Harper, if I'd continued believing Lana's lies. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, remembering her standing in that doorway, talking about how perfect the Harper children were. What did she want with them? What would she have done if I hadn't been there? The police increased patrols in the neighborhood for a while, but no one matching Lana's description was ever seen again. The Harpers installed a security system the next day. I've babysit for them twice more since then, but only because they specifically requested me, and because I couldn't bear the thought of someone else watching those kids, someone who might not be as careful about who they let in the house. Every time the doorbell rings now, anywhere, not just at their house, my heart stops for a second. I always check the peephole. I always keep the chain on. And I never, ever let anyone in anymore unless I'm absolutely certain they are who they say they are. I've been debating whether to post this for weeks now. I'm still not sleeping right, and telling someone, even strangers on the internet, might help me process what happened. This all went down about a month ago, and the police still don't have answers. I don't either. First, some background. I'm a grad student living in a small suburb outside Portland. Money's tight, so I pick up odd jobs when I can. My neighbor, Kara, who lived 2 doors down from my apartment, stopped me one morning as I was heading to campus. I didn't know her well, just the usual neighborly waves and small talk about the weather. She was probably in her mid-40s, always dressed in those flowy cardigans, with her graying blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. The kind of woman who'd bring you soup if you were sick. "Noah," she called out, "do you have a minute?" She explained she needed to visit her sister for the weekend and was looking for someone to house sit, feed her dog Milo, water the plants, that kind of thing. Then she mentioned the pay, $200 for basically 2 nights of hanging out in a nicer house than my crappy apartment. I agreed on the spot. Kara's house was exactly what you'd expect, one of those craftsman homes with a perfectly maintained yard, flower beds bursting with color, and an actual white picket fence. The type of place that makes you think, damn, this is what having your life together looks like. When I showed up Friday evening with my backpack of clothes and laptop, Milo, this big, goofy golden retriever, practically knocked me over with excitement. Kara gave me a quick tour. The living room had this soft blue couch that looked straight out of a Pottery Barn catalog, throw pillows arranged just so. The kitchen was spotless, with one of those fancy KitchenAid mixers on the counter. A small fish tank with 3 colorful fish sat next to the window. Everything smelled like lavender and vanilla. "Milo's food is here," she said, pointing to a cabinet near the back door. 2 cups in the morning, 2 in the evening. He gets one treat before bed, no more, or he'll beg all night. She showed me where the remotes were, told me to help myself to anything in the fridge, and mentioned she'd left emergency numbers on the kitchen counter. Standard stuff. One last thing, she added, almost as an afterthought. If you hear any weird noises from the basement, don't worry about it. The furnace makes odd sounds sometimes, and there are mice I haven't gotten around to dealing with. Just ignore it. I didn't think anything of it. Old houses make noises. Mine sounds like someone's walking around at 3 a.m. sometimes. Kara handed me the keys, thanked me again, and left. That first night was completely normal. I ordered pizza, played with Milo, binged some Netflix show I'd been meaning to watch. The house felt peaceful, comfortable. I remember thinking I'd scored the easiest $200 ever. Saturday morning, I woke up around 9, fed Milo, and made coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone when I noticed Milo acting strange. He was staring at the basement door, which was next to the kitchen, with his ears perked up. Then he started growling, low and deep, not playful at all. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, but he just kept staring at the door. That's when I heard it, a shuffling sound, like someone dragging something across the floor. Then a thump. I froze with my coffee mug halfway to my mouth. Milo's growl intensified, his body stiff and hackles raised. Honestly, my first thought was raccoon, or maybe the mice Kara mentioned had gotten into something. The sound came again, shuffle, shuffle, thump. This wasn't a mouse. This sounded heavier, deliberate. I grabbed my phone and texted Kara, "Hey, hearing some weird noises from your basement. Should I check it out? Milo's acting strange too." Her response came almost immediately. "No, it's just the house settling. Do not go in the basement." The all caps freaked me out a little. Seemed like an overreaction for some house noises. Then again, maybe she had expensive stuff stored down there she didn't want me messing with. I tried to shake it off. Took Milo for a walk, came back, made lunch. But the whole time, I kept glancing at that door, and Milo wouldn't go near it. Around 2 p.m., I was watching TV when I heard another noise. This time, it sounded like scratching, like nails on wood. Then what sounded like a muffled voice. My heart started pounding. That was definitely not a house settling. That sounded like a person. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe someone broke in, but the house was locked up tight, and Milo would have gone nuts if a stranger entered. Maybe Kara had another pet she didn't tell me about, but why would she lie about that? The scratching came again, more insistent this time. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just call the police? Looking back, I should have. But in the moment, I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Kara was embarrassed about having rats or something. Plus, I didn't want to look like an idiot if cops showed up and found nothing, so I did the stupid thing that people always do in horror movies. I decided to check it out myself. I grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and a knife from the kitchen, just in case. Milo whined and backed away as I approached the basement door. My hand shook as I turned the knob. The door opened to reveal a dark staircase. I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. Great. Taking a deep breath, I pointed my flashlight down the stairs and began to descend. The steps creaked under my weight. The air felt cooler, musty, but not dirty or neglected. It smelled clean, almost too clean, like a hospital. When I reached the bottom, I swept my flashlight around. What I saw wasn't at all what I expected. The basement was immaculate. Organized shelves lined the walls, filled with neatly labeled plastic bins. Winter clothes, Christmas decorations, tax documents, totally normal stuff. The floor was bare concrete but looked recently swept. Nothing seemed out of place or disturbing, until I turned toward the far wall. There, lined up in a row, were glass terrariums. Big ones like you'd see in a pet store. Must have been at least 8 of them, each with a mesh top secured with metal clips. And inside each one was a large, hairy spider. I'm not talking about regular house spiders. These were massive, tarantulas, I guess. Some were brown, others black or striped. One was bright orange. Some pressed against the glass, while others moved in slow, deliberate circles around their enclosures. I hate spiders, like seriously hate them. But as creepy as they weren't what made my blood run cold. It was the sound of tapping that drew my attention to the far corner of the basement. Tap, 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 like fingernails on glass. I swung my flashlight in that direction, and that's when I saw it. A cage. Not like an animal crate. A human-sized cage. And there was someone inside. A man. Filthy. With matted hair and a scraggly beard. He was wearing what looked like pajama pants and a stained t-shirt. His eyes squinted in the flashlight beam, and I could see they were bloodshot and wild-looking. He was tapping a plastic cup against the bars of the cage. "Please," he said, his voice hoarse like he hadn't used it in a while. "Help me. She'll be back soon. You have to get me out." I stood there, frozen in shock. This couldn't be real. This kind of shit doesn't happen in real life, in normal neighborhoods with flower beds and picket fences. "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "Daniel," he whispered. "She's been keeping me here for months. Please, the key is in the blue box on the shelf. Hurry." My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Sweet, cookie-baking Kara had a man locked in a cage in her basement, surrounded by giant spiders. It was insane. I was about to step toward the shelf he'd pointed at when I heard something that made my heart stop. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway above. Footsteps on the porch. A key in the lock. "She's back," Daniel hissed. "Hide!" But there was nowhere to hide. The basement was too open. I'd be seen immediately. "Please," he begged, "at least promise you'll come back. Call the police. Don't leave me here." Upstairs, I heard the front door open. Milo barking excitedly. "Noah," Kara called out. "Are you home?" I made a split-second decision. I turned off my flashlight and practically sprinted up the stairs as quietly as I could. I closed the basement door behind me just as Kara appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Oh, there you are," she said, smiling that same gentle smile I'd seen 100 times. She was carrying grocery bags, acting completely normal, like she didn't have a human being locked in her basement. "I thought I'd surprise you and come back early," she continued, setting the bags on the counter. "My sister was feeling better, so I didn't need to stay the whole weekend. I brought stuff to make dinner as a thank you." I tried to keep my face neutral, but my heart was hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it. My hand was still gripping the knife, hidden behind my back. That's really nice," I managed to say. My voice sounded strangled. Kara tilted her head, studying me. "Is everything okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just a headache. Actually, I was just about to head out. I have a group project meeting I forgot about." "Oh?" She looked disappointed. "That's too bad. I was going to make my special lasagna." I edged toward the living room where my backpack sat on the couch. "Yeah, sorry. School stuff, you know how it is." She followed me, still smiling, but something had changed in her eyes. They looked sharper somehow, calculating. "Did you hear anything while I was gone?" she asked casually. I swallowed hard. "Hear anything?" "You know, the house makes strange noises sometimes. I was wondering if you noticed." It felt like a test, like she knew I'd been in the basement. "No, I said, trying to sound casual. Nothing unusual. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, making up excuses about deadlines and apologizing for leaving so abruptly. The whole time, I could feel her eyes on me. As I reached the door, she said, "Noah?" I turned, half expecting to see her holding a knife or something, but she was just standing there, still smiling. "Don't forget your payment," she said, holding out an envelope. I took it automatically, mumbled a thanks, and practically ran to my car. I drove straight to the police station, told them everything. They seemed skeptical at first. Who wouldn't be? But agreed to check it out. When they got to Kara's house an hour later, she was gone. So was Milo. The man in the basement, Daniel, was gone too. The spiders, the cage, everything. The basement was empty, except for some old furniture and boxes. The cops thought I was crazy or playing a prank. I insisted they check property records, missing persons reports, anything. They did, but it led nowhere. Kara Turner didn't exist, at least not the one who lived in that house. The property was owned by a company registered in Delaware, with a trail that went cold quickly. 2 days after my report, a "for sale" sign appeared in the yard. A cleaning crew came and emptied the house. When I tried to talk to them, they said they'd been hired through an app and didn't know anything. I checked the missing persons databases sometimes, looking for Daniel's face, but I've never found him. I don't know if he got away, or if Kara took him with her. I don't know what she wanted with him, or with the spiders. The worst part is that I wonder if I imagined it all. If maybe grief over my mom's recent death or stress from school made me hallucinate the whole thing. But then I remember Daniel's eyes. The terror in them was too real. I still have the envelope Kara gave me. It has $400 in it, not the $200 we agreed on. Sometimes I think it was hush money. Other times I think it was a threat, like she was saying she knows where I live. I moved out of my apartment the next week. I couldn't stand being that close to her empty house, wondering if she was watching me somehow. The police case is still open, technically, but they've stopped returning my calls. No one believes me. Sometimes I don't even believe myself. But I know what I saw in that basement. And every time I see a spider now, even a tiny one, I think of Kara's smile and those glass terrariums. And I wonder where she is now, who she's pretending to be, and if there's another basement somewhere with another cage. I still don't sleep right. It's been 4 months since I house sat for the Wilcoxes, and I wake up at every little sound. My roommate thinks I've lost it. Maybe I have. Let me back up. I was between jobs last November, just doing some freelance web design work while looking for something more permanent. Money was tight, so when my mom's friend mentioned that her neighbors needed a house sitter for a few weeks, I jumped at the chance. The Wilcoxes were this sweet older couple in their 70s. They'd decided to move to Arizona for Mr. Wilcox's arthritis, but weren't ready to sell their house yet. They just needed someone to look after the place and take care of their cat Ginger while they figured things out. Easy money, right? All I had to do was feed a cat, water some plants, and make sure the house didn't burn down. The house itself was this massive gray Victorian at the end of Chestnut Lane. It sat back from the road with these huge oak trees all around it. The kind of place that probably looked charming in spring, but in November just looked gloomy as hell. Black shutters, peeling paint in places, overgrown yard. Still, it was a nice neighborhood, and the Wilcoxes seemed normal enough. Mrs. Wilcox, Janet, gave me the tour, showing me where everything was, how to work the finicky furnace, which day to put the trash out, the usual stuff. She kept apologizing for the house being so old and full of quirks. "It creaks and groans at night," she said, laughing, "but don't worry, it's just settling." Great. Exactly what you want to hear before staying alone in a huge old house. The Wilcoxes left for Arizona that afternoon. Janet handed me a typed list of instructions for Ginger's care. She gets very upset if her food bowl isn't completely clean before new food goes in. And then they were gone. Just me and Ginger in this enormous house. The first couple days were fine, peaceful even. I set up my laptop in the dining room and got some work done during the day. Ginger was demanding but entertaining. This snooty Siamese who acted like I was her personal butler. The house was dead quiet except for my typing and Ginger's occasional yowls for attention. I actually liked the silence at first. My apartment is on a busy street, so the quiet felt like a luxury. I could think without hearing traffic or my roommate's TV blaring. And the Wi-Fi was decent, which was honestly my biggest concern. On the third night, things changed. I was asleep in the guest bedroom. I didn't feel right sleeping in the Wilcox's bed when I woke up to a soft thud from upstairs. It was around 2 a.m. according to my phone. Probably just the house settling, like Janet said, but I lay there fully awake, listening. Nothing for a few minutes, then another thud. Definitely from the second floor. Ginger was asleep at the foot of my bed, so it wasn't her. I wondered if a window had blown open. It was a windy night. I grabbed my phone for its flashlight and headed upstairs. The steps creaked under my weight, each sound seeming impossibly loud in the quiet house. The second floor was pitch black except for my phone light bouncing off the walls of the narrow hallway. I checked the bathroom first, nothing. Then the small office, also fine. In the master bedroom, I found a window open about 6 inches, the curtains fluttering in the wind. The weird thing was, I could have sworn that window had been locked. I distinctly remembered checking all the windows when I first arrived because Janet had been concerned about security. I closed and locked it, chalking it up to my own forgetfulness. Maybe I just thought I'd checked this one. Back in bed, I couldn't fall asleep. Every noise, the furnace kicking on, the refrigerator humming, the wind outside, seemed amplified. I finally dozed off around 4 a.m. The next morning, I went downstairs to make coffee and found the back door unlocked. Not just unlocked, the deadbolt was turned to the open position. I stood there staring at it, coffee mug in hand, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. I knew I'd locked that door before going to bed. I always double-checked the doors. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I'd gone out to take out the trash and forgotten to lock it afterward. But I couldn't remember doing that. Throughout the day, I noticed other small things out of place. A dining room chair that was pulled out slightly, a lamp in the living room that was turned on, though I didn't remember leaving it that way. A glass in the kitchen sink that I didn't recognize using. It was subtle stuff, things I might not have noticed if I wasn't already on edge. I started taking pictures of how I left rooms before going to bed, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. That night, I made sure to check every single door and window before going to bed. I even moved a chair in front of my bedroom door, just in case. I felt ridiculous doing it, but it made me feel safer. I woke up around 1 a.m. to the sound of Ginger hissing. She was at the bedroom door, her back arched, fur standing on end. I froze, listening. That's when I heard it. A shuffling sound from downstairs. Like footsteps, but muffled, as if someone was trying to move quietly. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. It had to be an intruder. There was someone in the house. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but but then hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if it was just the house making noise, and I called the cops for no reason? The Wilcoxes would think I was an idiot. The shuffling stopped. Then I heard what sounded like a cabinet closing in the kitchen. Fuck this. I needed to know what was happening. I looked around for something to use as a weapon. There wasn't much in the guest room, just some books and a small lamp. I unplugged the lamp and held it by the base. Better than nothing. I crept out of the bedroom, trying to avoid the squeaky floorboards I'd discovered earlier in the week. The hallway was dark except for a faint glow coming from the kitchen. I hadn't left any lights on down there. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the lamp. I considered going back to my room, locking the door, and calling 911. That would have been the smart thing to do. But for some stupid reason, I kept going. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I could see light spilling from the kitchen doorway, and shadows moving. Someone was definitely in there. I spotted Mr. Wilcox's golf bag by the front door. I silently set down the lamp and pulled out a club, a 7-iron, I think. The metal felt solid and reassuring in my hands. I edged toward the kitchen, golf club raised. The shuffling sounds continued, along with a weird mumbling that I couldn't make out. It didn't sound like burglars. It sounded like someone talking to themselves. I reached the kitchen doorway and peered around the corner. The pantry door was open, and there was someone inside, rummaging through the shelves. I could only see their back, a tall, thin figure in dark, filthy clothes. They were pulling out boxes of cereal and crackers, examining each one before setting them on the floor. I must have made a sound, because suddenly they turned around. I'll never forget that face as long as I live. Hollow cheeks, matted beard, and these wild, feverish eyes that locked onto mine with a look of surprise that quickly turned to rage. It was a man, probably in his 30s but looking much older. His clothes were caked with dirt, his hair greasy and tangled. He smelled like sweat and something rotten. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then he lunged at me. I swung the golf club without thinking. It connected with his shoulder, and he let out a pained yelp, but kept coming. His hands grabbed at my shirt, and I could feel his fingers, cold and grimy, brushing against my neck. I shoved him back and swung again, this time catching him in the side. He stumbled into the kitchen table but stayed on his feet. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice sounding strange and thin. "Get the fuck out!" He bared his teeth, yellowed, some missing, and grabbed a knife from the cutting block on the counter. That's when real terror hit me. This wasn't just some homeless guy looking for food. This was someone dangerous. I backed away, still holding the golf club in front of me. He followed, knife pointed at my chest, making these low, grunting sounds that didn't even sound human. I kept backing up until I hit the wall next to the front door. He was between me and any exit. My phone was upstairs. I was trapped. In desperation, I feinted left, then dodged right, and bolted for the living room. I heard him behind me, his breathing ragged. I vaulted over the couch and grabbed the heavy flashlight I'd left on the coffee table, one of those big metal ones that takes D batteries. When he came around the couch, I flung the flashlight as hard as I could at his head. It caught him right in the temple with a sickening thud. He dropped to his knees, the knife clattering to the floor. I didn't wait to see if he got up. I ran for the front door, fumbled with the locks with shaking hands, and burst outside into the cold night air. I ran to the neighbor's house and pounded on their door until lights came on inside. The police arrived within minutes. 3 patrol cars, lights flashing, illuminating the dark street. They entered the Wilcox house with guns drawn, while I waited in the back of a police car, shivering despite the blanket an officer had draped around my shoulders. It took them about 20 minutes to come out. One of the officers approached the car and opened the door. "We got him," he said. "You're safe now." They brought him out in handcuffs, the man from the kitchen. In the harsh glare of the police lights, he looked even worse, emaciated, filthy, his eyes darting around wildly. He didn't struggle, just kept mumbling to himself as they put him in the back of a patrol car. The officers asked me to come inside to answer some questions and to see if anything was missing. I didn't want to go back in that house, but I forced myself. They'd turned on all the lights, which made the place look less threatening. An officer named Rodriguez walked me through what they'd found. The man's name was Nate something. I don't remember his last name. He had a history of mental illness and drug offenses, and he'd been living in the Wilcox house for weeks. Not just staying there while I was asleep, living there, in the basement. Rodriguez showed me the basement door, which was hidden in the back of a pantry. A small door I'd assumed was just a deep cupboard. I'd never opened it. "The Wilcoxes didn't mention this to you?" Rodriguez asked. I shook my head, feeling sick. The basement was accessed by a narrow set of stairs that led to a dirt floor cellar, and down there they'd found his nest, a sleeping bag laid out in the corner, piles of dirty clothes, empty food containers, bottles filled with what I later learned was urine, and most disturbing of all, a collection of hunting knives arranged in a neat row on a piece of cloth. 10 knives of different sizes, all gleaming and sharp. "Looks like he's been coming and going for a while," Rodriguez said. "Probably went out during the day when you were here, came back at night." I thought about all those little things that had seemed off. The open window, the unlocked door, the glass in the sink. He'd been creeping around while I slept, taking what he needed, watching me. The thought made me throw up in the Wilcox's kitchen sink. The police think he'd been getting in through the basement window, which had a broken latch. He would wait until dark, then come upstairs to take food and use the bathroom when he thought no one would notice. When the Wilcoxes lived there, he must have been extra careful, only moving around when they were asleep or out of the house. But with just me there, maybe he got bolder. Or maybe he was planning something worse. I had to call the Wilcoxes that night and tell them what happened. Janet was horrified. They had no idea the basement was accessible from the pantry. They'd always used the outside entrance and had sealed it off years ago when Mr. Wilcox stopped being able to navigate the stairs. They thought the inside entrance had been permanently sealed during a renovation before they bought the place. The police found evidence that Nate had been coming and going from the basement for at least 3 months. 3 months of living under the Wilcoxes' feet without them knowing. I didn't go back to the house after that night. I couldn't. The police helped me gather my things, and I found a friend to take Ginger until the Wilcoxes could make arrangements. They put the house on the market immediately, disclosure forms and all. It's been 4 months, and I still jump at unexpected noises. I check my closets before bed. I've put extra locks on my apartment door. My roommate thinks I'm being paranoid, but he didn't see those knives laid out in a neat row. He didn't smell that rotten, unwashed stench or see those wild eyes locked on him in the dark. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. If I hadn't gone downstairs, would he have stayed hidden in the basement indefinitely? Or was he working his way up to something else entirely? I'll never know. And that's what keeps me awake at night. I'm not usually one to share personal stuff online, but I need to get this off my chest. I've been carrying this around for 3 months now, and I still jump when my phone rings. I keep telling myself there must be some logical explanation, but I haven't found one yet. I'm a junior at Westlake University, studying early childhood education, To make extra cash between classes and assignments, I babysit for a few families around town. The Martins were my regular Friday night gig. I started watching their daughter Sophie about 6 months ago when she was just starting to walk. She's the sweetest little girl with these big brown eyes and blonde curls that bounce when she laughs. The Martins live in this beautiful colonial-style house in Oakwood Estates. Not crazy fancy, but definitely nice. Wraparound porch, well-kept yard, the kind of place where you just feel safe, you know? Mrs. Martin, Kate, is a pediatrician, and Mr. Martin, David, works in finance. They're super normal, reliable people who always come home when they say they will and leave emergency contacts and detailed instructions. That Friday started like any other. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. Kate showed me the dinner she'd prepared for Sophie. Chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, her favorite. David reminded me that they'd be at Carmelo's downtown celebrating their anniversary dinner and would be back around 11:30. Standard stuff. Sophie's been a little cranky today, Kate mentioned while grabbing her purse. She didn't nap well at daycare. I wasn't worried. Sophie and I had our routine down. We played with her blocks on the living room floor, building towers for her to knock down. She giggled every time they crashed. Then we read 3 books. She always insisted on Goodnight Moon as the last one, before her bath. By 7:45, she was in her yellow duck pajamas, clutching her stuffed bunny. "Night-night," she said when I tucked her in, exactly at 8:00. I turned on her nightlight, a little projector that cast stars on her ceiling, switched on the baby monitor, and closed her door halfway, just how she liked it. With Sophie down, I had the usual stretch of free time. I grabbed some leftover pizza from the fridge that Kate said I could have, settled on their comfy sectional couch, and pulled up Netflix on my laptop. The baby monitor sat on the coffee table, Sophie's steady breathing, a reassuring background noise. At 8:30, the landline phone rang. I debated whether to answer. The Martins hadn't said to expect any calls, but I figured it might be them checking in on Sophie. I paused my show and picked up. "Martin residence, this is Lauren." There was nothing but silence for a few seconds, and I almost hung up thinking it was a wrong number. Then a man's voice came through. "You're good with kids. Nice job getting her to sleep." The voice wasn't threatening exactly. It was calm, conversational even, like someone making a casual observation about the weather. But it sent ice through my veins instantly. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Click. They hung up. I stood there holding the receiver, my heart suddenly pounding. I told myself it was probably just some random creep, or maybe a friend of the Martins playing a stupid joke. I tried calling the number back, but it showed up as unknown caller on the ID panel. I texted Kate, "Did someone call to check on Sophie?" but got no response. They were probably in the middle of dinner. I tried to go back to my show, but I kept glancing at the phone. After a few minutes, I got up and double-checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked tight. The Martins had a decent security system too, one of those with sensors on all entry points. The little panel by the front door showed it was armed, with all zones secure. I felt a little silly being so paranoid, but something about that call just felt off. The way he'd mentioned Sophie going to sleep, like he knew our routine. At 9 p.m. the phone rang again. My stomach dropped. I stared at it, debating whether to answer. On the 3rd ring, I picked up but didn't say anything. "She's so tiny," the same voice said. "I bet she has her mother's eyes." My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" I whispered. "What do you want?" "Just checking in," he replied, his tone still eerily casual. Making sure everything's all right with little Sophie. He knew her name. How did he know her name? I'm calling the police, I said. He chuckled softly. No need for that. I'm not doing anything wrong. He hung up again. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly dial my phone. I tried Kate first, straight to voicemail. Then David, same thing. I texted them both. Emergency. Please call me ASAP. I looked at the baby monitor. Sophie was still sleeping peacefully, her little chest rising and falling with each breath. I called the Martins' neighbor, Mrs. Patel, whose number was on the emergency contact list. No answer. I tried the other contact, Kate's sister, but got her voicemail too. I debated calling the police, but what would I say? Some creep made a couple of weird phone calls. I didn't have proof of an actual threat. But something in my gut told me this wasn't right. I decided to check on Sophie. Quietly, I climbed the stairs, wincing at each creak of the wood. Her door was still half open, exactly as I'd left it. I peeked in. She was still asleep, curled up with her bunny, looking completely peaceful. The star nightlight cast a gentle blue glow across her room. Everything seemed normal. Back downstairs, I turned up the volume on the baby monitor and called my roommate, Jen. Hey, something weird is happening, I whispered, explaining the calls. That's seriously creepy, she said. Maybe you should call the cops anyway. I don't know if they'd take it seriously, I said. Nothing's actually happened. Well, make sure all the doors are locked and maybe grab a knife from the kitchen just in case. Yeah, I think I will, I said, heading to the kitchen. I took out a large chef's knife and placed it on the counter within reach. At 9:15, the phone rang a third time. My heart was already racing. I answered immediately. Leave me alone or I'm calling the police. You shouldn't ignore me, Lauren. My name. He said my name. How do you know my name? My voice was barely audible. I know lots of things, he said. I know you're studying to be a teacher. I know you've been watching Sophie for almost 6 months now. I know the Martins pay you $18 an hour. I couldn't breathe. These weren't random calls. This person knew me, knew details about my life, about this job. What do you want? I asked again. Just to talk, he said. I'm feeling lonely tonight. I'm calling the police, I said with more conviction than before. Before you do that, he paused. You might want to check on Sophie again. The line went dead. I looked at the baby monitor. Everything seemed fine, but then I heard it. Soft humming coming through the speaker. Someone was humming, "Hush, little baby." It wasn't coming from outside. It sounded like it was in Sophie's room. I grabbed the knife and ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I burst into Sophie's room expecting the worst. She was still asleep in her crib. The room was empty. The humming had stopped. I scanned every corner, looked under the crib, behind the curtains, in the closet. Nothing. No one was there. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. There was a small piece of paper taped to the window above Sophie's crib. My blood turned to ice. I know I hadn't seen it when I checked on her earlier. With shaking hands, I peeled it off and read the handwritten message. Stop checking the monitor. Start checking the windows. I looked at the window, then at every window in the room. They were all closed and locked from the inside. How did this note get here? That was it. I scooped up Sophie, who startled awake and began crying. I grabbed her bunny in a blanket, ran downstairs and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's been calling the house where I'm babysitting, I said, trying to calm Sophie with one arm while holding the phone with the other. He knows my name. He knows details about the family, and now there's a note in the baby's room that wasn't there before. Is there any sign of forced entry? The dispatcher asked. No, but are you and the child safe right now? Yes, but someone put a note in her room. They must have been in the house. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Where are you in the house right now? In the kitchen, I said, grabbing the knife again. I have the baby with me. Is there a room you can secure yourself in until officers arrive? I looked around frantically. The bathroom off the kitchen has a lock. Go there and lock the door. Officers should be there in about 6 minutes. I hurried into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat, trying to soothe Sophie, who was still crying. I kept the knife balanced on the edge of the sink. It's okay, sweetie, I whispered, rocking her. Everything's okay. But it wasn't okay. Someone had been in this house. Someone had been in Sophie's room while she was sleeping. The thought made me physically sick. The police arrived in what felt like forever, but was probably closer to 5 minutes. I heard them announcing themselves at the front door. The dispatcher told me to stay put until the officers cleared the house. I heard them moving around upstairs, checking rooms, closets, under beds. Finally, there was a knock on the bathroom door. Ms. Jenkins, this is Officer Peterson with the Oakwood PD. You can come out now. I unlocked the door to find a female officer standing there. She escorted me and Sophie to the living room, where another officer, a middle-aged man with a mustache, was waiting. We've checked the entire house, he said. There's no one here. All doors and windows are locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. But the note, can I see it? I handed him the note from my pocket. He examined it, then looked at me skeptically. And you're sure this wasn't here earlier when you put the child to bed? Positive, I insisted. I've been in that room dozens of times. I would have noticed. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully believe me. What about the phone calls? I asked. We can request the records from the phone company, but that will take time. Officer Peterson said. Did you recognize the voice? No, I said. It was just calm, creepy calm. They took my statement, but I could tell they thought this was either a prank or that I was overreacting. They suggested it might be a friend of the Martins, or maybe even a neighbor with a cordless phone getting crossed signals. None of their explanations made sense with what happened. I called the Martins again and finally reached Kate. They were alarmed and said they'd come home immediately. While waiting, the officers stayed with me. Sophie had settled down and was playing with toys on the living room floor, completely unaware of what was happening. We get calls like this more often than you'd think, Officer Peterson said, trying to reassure me. Usually turns out to be nothing serious. But it felt serious to me. Someone had been watching me. Someone knew details about my life, about Sophie, about this house. When the Martins got home about 20 minutes later, they were understandably upset. They checked on Sophie right away, then listened as I explained what happened, with the officers adding their assessment. But who would do something like this? Kate kept asking. And how did a note get into Sophie's room? No one had a good answer. The officers suggested it might be a sophisticated prank, but promised to follow up. They took the note as evidence and said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood that night. After they left, the Martins insisted I stay the night in their guest room. They didn't want me driving home upset, and honestly, I didn't want to be alone. David checked all the locks again and even moved a chair in front of the front door. As I was gathering my things from the living room, I glanced at the baby monitor one last time. The screen showed Sophie's room, now dark except for the star nightlight. And there, in the window above her crib, I saw it, the faint outline of a face, just a shadow really, watching. I gasped and pointed. There, in the window! David ran upstairs immediately. Kate grabbed the monitor, staring at it. The face was gone. David came back, breathing hard. "There's no one there," he said. "I checked outside too. No footprints in the flower bed, nothing." We all stood there, the same thought hanging unspoken between us. How could someone look into a second-story window without leaving a trace? I spent a sleepless night in their guest room, jumping at every creak and shadow. The next morning, the police called to say the phone records showed no incoming calls to the Martins' landline during the hours I was there. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. The Martins changed their phone number and installed security cameras the next week. They asked if I'd still be willing to babysit, but I couldn't. Just the thought of being in that house again makes my skin crawl. I still don't have an explanation for what happened that night. Sometimes I almost convince myself it was all in my head, some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But then I remember the note, a physical piece of paper that the police took as evidence. I check my locks twice every night now. I don't answer calls from numbers I don't recognize. And I've stopped babysitting altogether, because whoever was watching us that night, whoever called and left that note, I can't shake the feeling they're still watching, waiting for the right moment to do more than just look.